it could impact the weather of its next door neighbours, and that could be seen as an act of war. These questions need to be answered on a kind of global consensus, and frankly, we haven't seen that level of international cooperation yet.
Whether startups like Make Sunsets can have an impact on our climate is questionable. But one thing's certain, they've kickstarted a debate about the need to employ more drastic measures in the battle against climate change. And with it, they may have opened the door for other startups in the geoengineering space to enter through.
I think it's more dangerous to do nothing, and I think that in general, people should take actions to try to solve problems that are important to them.
The only thing that's preventing us from scaling right now is demand, really. And that demand, I believe, will increase as the world heats up. That's the sad part about this entire thing. Mother Nature is actually our best marketing person. As the world heats up, as there's more catastrophic climate events, as there's more hurricanes, people will start to say, why is it getting so hot and why isn't anyone doing anything about this?
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, Mondays on Bloomberg.
Used to be one would say, what's that got to do with the price of tea in China, when they wanted to poke holes in the relevance of something. Now though, if you're in tune with how events around the world affect each other, it becomes clear that the current going rate of tea in China has a lot to do with a lot of things, not just tea things either. The tariffs, franchises, and IPOs. How much?
Another geoengineering mission underway to reverse climate change is by Edwina Tanner and her team at WhaleX. Today, they're getting ready for a day of collecting data in the Coral Sea. Their aim is to suck up carbon from the atmosphere with the help of these guys.
Whales are the original climate engineers. They come up to the surface waters and they evacuate large fecal plumes of really rich nutrients.
These plumes of poo are quite important.
These nutrients are really important to feeding the bottom of the food chain and the marine environment.
The nutrients found in the plumes feed phytoplankton, kickstarting an increase known as phytoplankton bloom. The phytoplankton naturally capture CO2 via photosynthesis and convert the CO2 into organic compounds. After the phytoplankton die, they sink to the deep ocean, carrying carbon with it. The whole process is considered a biological carbon pump and transfers about 10 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere to the deep ocean each year. To simulate their own carbon pump, WhaleX invented a substance called aquafood, which is artificial whale poo. The aquafood would be tailored to local climates and released in multiple locations, thus exponentially increasing the amount of carbon removed from the atmosphere. This is a type of marine geoengineering or ocean fertilization. Once the aquafood has been perfected, the WhaleX team hopes to spread it across existing shipping routes.
We're also looking at just adapting ships that are already crisscrossing the ocean and giving them modular plants for ocean nourishment, which could all happen in the right ocean location. And this way we could do light touches of ocean nourishment all around the world off different ships. I think shipping itself needs to decarbonize, so this could be part of the solution for the whole shipping industry.
There are desert areas of the ocean. By adding nutrients to these desert areas, we can make phytoplankton grow in large quantities.
It has a bunch of eggs in it.
Oh yeah? Oh gosh, it's amazing. Phytoplankton are tiny, you can't even see them, but they are the climate giants and they are the things that are actually going to save us. They provide 50% of the oxygen that we breathe on the earth. And from our experiments, by putting in 200 litres of nutrients, which is about a 1 whale poo, we can actually sequester about a tonne of carbon.
But phytoplankton, some of which are algae, can grow too much, producing toxic algae blooms. You typically see this in stagnant or slow-moving rivers or lakes or on the coastlines.
But this does not happen in the open ocean. With a whale fecal plume, the nutrients are able to be used by phytoplankton productively instead of destructively.
This, proving their work is productive and not destructive, is the challenge. Studies on ocean fertilization aren't yet conclusive, and safely testing the science without harming sensitive ecosystems takes money, time, and expertise. For billionaires or anxious VCs looking for quick results, it's not ideal.
Billionaire philanthropists are really focused on impact, and they're looking for data and ways that they can measure that their dollars are making an impact on whatever issue they're interested in, from public health or education, everything.
To actually do the science we're doing literally costs the amount of a blockbuster movie.
Today is a big day for the WhaleX team as they prepare to embark on a 4-day research trip. It's taken them a year to build their own biopod, which allows them to test the effects of their aquafood on a controlled area of the ocean. The biopod pumps air and nutrients into the water, growing phytoplankton.
The nutrient is essentially feeding the phytoplankton which are in the seawater.
Why is it sinking at this end and not and slide at that end?
But the biopod's first trip into the wild doesn't go as expected. It keeps sinking.
Some of the aeration chambers didn't fire because of too much pressure, so we'll need a bigger pump to make that work. So yes, not exactly to plan, as a lot of experiments are, but we are going to get some pretty good data that will inform our next trial.
The experiment is scrapped and will need to be repeated, and that takes, you guessed it, money.
I was told point blank by a very prominent head of a venture capital fund that if I talk to a company who has a brilliant idea but a meh business plan, and then I talk to a company that has maybe not such a good idea but a very good business plan that's going to make money, I'm going to fund company B every time. And I really find this is a bit of a juxtaposition, because what we need to fund is these really good ideas that are great for the planet, but perhaps are not so great for your wallet.
In case you missed this on the opening trade.
Some people ask me, are you done with short selling? No, but I would much rather be long than be short in this market, I think is the terse answer there. Look, if you're out there trying to short NVIDIA or any of these big tech names, you're not going to be in business very long. When I look at AI, you have all these AI adjacent companies, you have these AI player or AI pretenders. That's where you would want to look to short. However, so long as the leaders, such as NVIDIA, are still going up and to the right, I think that would be a very dangerous trade. So, yeah, we have a list of names that we think are suspect, and when the time is right and some of the froth is out of the leaders in the space, that's when we're going to look at them. But until that point, we're staying out of those waters.
Don't miss the opening trade, live every weekday.
We're at the epicenter of a global realignment on a scale not seen for decades. At the intersection between markets, economics, and geopolitics, a forum for sophisticated conversation. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bringing you up to them in the news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Shariani in Seoul, and this is Bloomberg.
Despite being an early mover, WhaleX's growth has been stunted by a lack of funding. Right now, WhaleX says its main support comes from Professor Wien and other private donations. In 2025, they hope to complete a crowdfunding campaign and strike deals with industry partners.
It's almost like what you need to do to write a successful science paper is sort of the opposite of what you need to do to sell a business model. You have all of these forces that encourage you to attract attention and be flashy and speak with utter confidence. In science, there's no such thing as 0% or 100% confidence.
In the meantime, the only other way to raise funds is to offer carbon credits.
Once you can prove and verify your carbon sequestration, then you can actually sell off your credits to a company. We're not quite there yet, but this is the aim that in the future this will happen.
So, step one for all these startups is figuring out how much carbon you've removed from the atmosphere, which, when you're dealing with a sample size the size of the ocean, is challenging enough. Then you need to apply a dollar amount to that carbon. And since the carbon offsets market is what you might call loosely regulated,
It's been very confusing, very wild, wild west.
that dollar amount is flexible. And while there is an existing framework to rely on for the calculation of carbon removal credits, there's no such thing for solar radiation management. Make Sunsets, for example, sells something it's called cooling credits.
We sell cooling credits, where 1 gram of SO2 in the stratosphere offsets the warming effect of 1 ton of CO2 for a year. That literally costs $16 per year for you to offset your carbon footprint for 1 year.
Mate Sunset's cooling credits are really quite murky in how they're calculated.
It'll be verified via existing satellite infrastructure that can already detect volcanic eruptions, and it's just infrared cameras. And so at scale, you don't have to trust us anymore. There's satellites that currently detect volcanic eruptions that can also detect our deployments at scale.
From an investor point of view, something like ocean fertilization, although it's very novel, the science is not quite there yet, there is a path to market through the EU carbon dioxide removal framework. There is a lot of rigorous work going into making sure that these credits do what they say they do. That is not the case for solar radiation management.
For now, the marriage between experimental geoengineering and the private sector is an imperfect union. But as the need for climate solutions grows, so too will the interest in unconventional methods.
We have to be able to crawl before we can walk, and then before we can run. The best analogy I can give is, Jeff Bezos, Google. They started in a garage. This is the garage you're looking at right now.
There is very little doubt that the pressures that are causing people to investigate geoengineering as a mature, rational option, that's just going to keep on keeping on. Every year, every decade that the world warms, we're going to need solutions that may seem increasingly less desperate.
And with all of these geoengineering concepts, there is an elephant with a colossal carbon footprint stomping around the room. Human ambitions.
It's not a solution to the problem. Climate change is caused by industrial greenhouse gas emissions going up into the atmosphere and warming the planet. And geoengineering isn't gonna reverse that basic fact. At a certain point, you do have to figure out how much risk you're willing to bear and what the penalties are for you if you choose wrongly.
Peru is maybe first country inspired to me to how can I use the different ingredients. First time we went to Peru, trying to culture food, I never had these ingredients never used in Japan. Kind of like a wow, and cilantros, chili, garlic, and olive oils. So a lot of good seafoods, complete a different way. Example, they have the fresh fish. But Japan, fresh fish uses sashimi. But Peru use fresh fish, make the called ceviche, cooked with lemon juice. You never use the soy sauce. First time I eat this, kind of the wow. So then after this one, my open eye more, my cooking style will change. Combine to Japanese style and another country food, then make novel style.
Bringing you the world's business and financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at Mount Everest, and this is Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, on the pulse.
Distinguish between companies are here because they're running international operations, the companies that are indigenous and working with the citizens of the UK, and make sure you get the regulation strategies right. With the rule of law and the great city of London and the great country that UK is, there's plenty of upside.
What do you tell the Prime Minister?
I tell them to make sure the regulation's fair, be the best place for a non-UK based company to operate, and you'll get companies coming here.
Don't miss the pulse, live every weekday.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Good morning. I'm Joanna Versace in Dubai. Here's what we're following this morning. The latest Federal Reserve minutes showed most officials favor additional rate cuts if inflation eases as expected, though they remain divided over when and how far to cut. The minutes pointed to the difficulty members faced in December, reinforcing expectations that the Fed will keep rates unchanged in January. Officials also noted that a lack of economic data during the shutdown limited their analysis, but said new figures in the coming weeks could help guide future decisions. President Xi Jinping says that China met its main economic goals in 2025, signaling it may hit its roughly 5% growth target. His remarks providing an upbeat backdrop to data showing a recovery in the nation's manufacturing sector. Now, China's factory activity surprised with an expansion in December, snapping an 8-month contraction streak, the longest slump on record. Bloomberg has learned that Warner Brothers Discovery plans to once again reject a takeover bid from Paramount. Sources say its board will meet next week to make a final decision. Paramount is offering $30 a share for all of its Warner Brothers, including its cable networks CNN and TNT. Warner Brothers has already accepted an offer from Netflix for $27.50 a share. Now, oil is headed for its steepest annual loss since the start of the pandemic. Prices have been undermined by concerns of a surplus. Brent steadied above $61 a barrel, with prices down 18% so far this year. WTI near $58. Meanwhile, Bloomberg has learned OPEC Plus is expected to stick with a planned output pause when it meets on January the 4th. Key members led by Saudi Arabia and Russia will meet virtually and review the decision. The United Arab Emirates is withdrawing troops from Yemen after flare-up in tensions with Saudi Arabia. That's after a Saudi-led coalition struck a Yemeni port, targeting what it said was a weapons shipment from a UAE port. The two countries support rival factions in Yemen. Abu Dhabi had earlier denied allegations by Riyadh that it directed a separatist group in a way that threatened the Saudi border. And a look at markets on the final trading day of 2025, the handover from Asia Pacific ex-Japan, which is closed for a holiday today. Marginally positive, though, for the year. Global MSCI indices up more than 20%. S&P markets also slightly in the red this morning, down 0.2%, but up more than 17% for 2025. Silver taking a bit of a tumble today, down 6%. So the volatility continues throughout the course of this week, though, of course, it is still up more than 150% this year. And then Brent stabilizing around $61.30. That is where we're at, down more than 17% throughout the course of 2025. That's your recap. This is Bloomberg.
This is a flying car, or at least the modern approximation of one. And so is this, and this, and this.
The dream of the flying car is really something that unites the biggest, most influential inventions of the 21st century. The big movies have featured these flying cars. Blade Runner with Harrison Ford in the 1980s, and even Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox.
We don't need roads.
The idea of flying cars has been around since, well, cars were invented, basically. Early versions, like the Curtiss autoplane, looked like a Ford Model T with wings attached to it. Unsurprisingly, these early attempts never really got off the ground. But public fascination hasn't waned. Today, a global gaggle of engineers and investors haven't given up on the flying car dream. But But as they'll insist, just don't call it a flying car.
It's pretty terrible. It's eVTOL is the way that you say it. Yeah, not the most user-friendly acronym.
eVTOL, it sounds a bit enigmatic. It means electrical vertical takeoff and landing. The name is not maybe very sexy.
Sexy name or not, eVTOLs are a billion-dollar industry. There's some pretty big name backers who are trying to cash in on this new mode of transportation. The question is, can this new generation of aircraft make it in the world? And do we even want them?
You've seen different types of partnerships emerge. So on the one hand, we have traditional aerospace, but then we also have seen the automotive industry engage.
The eVTOL industry is certainly an emerging industry. It has momentum. It has huge global ambitions. But at the same time, it's an entirely unproven market.
I've been always passionate about flight from a very young age, always looking up to the sky.
Tomasz Patan is the founder and CTO of Jetson, a company that's building a flying car. Sorry, eVTOL.
This is where we keep some of the fleet that is no longer in operation. This one has been testing parachutes for us, up until the point that one of the tests went sideways, and the whole passenger space is almost intact. So it's a good result of the test, and we have lots of data from it as we had redundant sensors on the vehicle that day. So for 11 years I've been doing drones with the camera and gimbals. These drones were getting bigger and bigger, and at some point I asked myself the question, what if we scale it so I could sit in there and pilot myself? Yes, we did. Probably everyone who first saw Jetson 1 noticed it's not like the rest of the eVTOL. It needs to be exciting. It has to be like a sports car.
Like a luxury sports car or ATV, Jetson's eVTOL is designed for personal use and can't be flown commercially. It's also not cheap. The Jetson 1 could set you back $128,000, and it's sold out through 2026. But not all eVTOLs are designed for personal thrill-seeking. One of the biggest commercial applications for the eVTOL is the air taxi, carrying passengers for short hops across crowded cities. But they have other uses too.
There's a host of other applications beyond that, which could turn into commercial opportunities. Talking like perhaps logistics, huge opportunities in cargo. Beyond that, you could go into the military areas, surveillance, reconnaissance, troop deployment on a small scale as well.
And investors are pouring a lot of money into them.
One of the reasons that this industry has drawn so much money, drawn so much investment, is the potential prize on offer. For instance, if you look at estimates from Morgan Stanley, the addressable market could be $1 trillion by 2040.
But what exactly makes an eVTOL? Well, an eVTOL. Let's break it down, shall we? eVTOLs are a new class of aircraft that are able to take off and land vertically and cruise like a plane. And they're electric. That means they're powered by electric propulsion. Here's how it works. Anything that flies relies on 4 forces to move up and through the air. These forces are lift, thrust, drag, and weight. A helicopter takes off and lands vertically, but relies on a single rotor to provide both the lift and thrust needed to fly. eVTOLs run on electric motors instead of jet fuel. The motors are distributed around the aircraft to power rotors and propellers, which provide thrust. And that's where the designs can get a little interesting. eVTOLs all look and fly completely differently. And eVTOLs have a couple of key advantages. They're typically quieter than helicopters. They emit less carbon, in theory anyways. And they're equipped with advanced flight control systems, which means they could be capable of autonomous flight. But we'll get to that later.
It's a fun fact, but our battery alone weighs more than the rest of the vehicle.
Remember, weight. One of the 4 forces that govern flight, it's crucial when it comes to getting anything airborne. And here's the thing, batteries are heavy, which is not great when you're already fighting gravity. It's because batteries have a lower energy density than fuel, which basically means that for their weight, batteries can't store as much energy. For example, you'd need roughly 50 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries to hold as much energy as just 1 kilogram of jet fuel.
Batteries are really critical to this whole equation. To a certain degree, they govern the capability and the performance of these aircraft. The batteries dictate the range, they dictate the power, they dictate the payload, how many people or how much cargo these things can carry, they dictate how fast they can recharge.
In recent years, there have been advancements in alternative sources of energy, like hybrid power and hydrogen. But for now, batteries are our best bet when it comes to electric flight.
In the years since it was first developed in the 1970s, chemists have improved just how much energy each kilogram of a lithium-ion battery can hold. That improvement has been quite linear for the past 3 decades, enabling us to start to put lithium-ion batteries first in electronics like laptops and iPods, and then eventually in electric cars. Some say that there are real upper limits for how much batteries can store in energy for each kilogram of that battery. And that limit shows up in, say, long-haul aviation. If you wanted to build an electric plane that would fly from London to New York, you're unlikely to be able to get a battery that would make that flight economically viable.
It's this limitation that makes eVTOLs suited for shorter trips with lighter loads. And the better that battery tech can get, the more potential they might have.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute global economic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Lizzie Burden in Florence, Italy, and this is Bloomberg.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greisfeld.
And I'm Romain Bostic, and this is The Close.
Every weekday from 3 to 5 Eastern.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
We are testing battery cells under aerospace-specific loads. As you can see here, as the aircraft takes off, it goes through a cruise, and then it lands. And what we're really doing is that we're understanding how these guys perform in flight.
One person who is looking into the limits of battery power in electric aviation is Matthew Clark.
We are seeing a lot of eVTOLs in the past, I would say, 2 decades because of the advancements of electric energy storage. Batteries that usually have lower energy densities are reaching the energy densities that can make short routes possible. Unfortunately, right now, many of these cells that are used today limit the range and operation of these aircraft. And as a result, they can only fly maybe 150 nautical miles.
But are batteries where they need to be?
Batteries are getting better every year. Not at the speed that we want them to in the aerospace community, but they're getting better every year. There's going to be a natural progression of checking what I call the illities, the manufacturability, the integrity, all these illities that have to be considered when you're taking any research product to make it a commercial one.
In other words, what's possible now and what's scalable are 2 different things. And while we wait for scientists to improve battery technology, there's no shortage of companies looking to cash in right now.
Let's load flight plan 1063-1, please. Flight plan 1063-1 in 3, 2.
Archer's aircraft development company that's building a new type of airplane where we're leveraging technology around batteries, electric motors to develop a brand new type of aircraft.
Everybody ready for flight? Tower, Archer 1, request clearance to flight plan 1063.
So in the lab here, the process starts with this station where we're taking cells and starting to test them and put them in the battery packs.
Archer is one of the many eVTOL companies globally that's racing to commercialize their aircraft in cities around the world. As of 2025, they had a market valuation of around $4 billion, and investors including Stellantis, United Airlines, BlackRock, just to name a few. They also have contracts with the US military.
We're here at our certification flight simulator in our integrated test lab. The hardware you see here is the real flight hardware from the aircraft running the real flight software so that we can test with pilots in the loop and exercise the entire system functionality. Our team is just under 1,000 people right now. We have a handful of other facilities where we do manufacturing of the motors and batteries, do system integration testing, and really prove that all the components and systems work together. And then another facility around here where we build our initial aircraft. We've also got a factory that we've just built out in the state of Georgia.
Archer is scaling up. And they're not the only ones. They're not even the only ones in Silicon Valley.
I have a 2-hour commute from where my home is, and so I fly instead of drive because the flight is only 20 minutes instead of a 2-hour drive. So I am a personal use case of how I could use and fly in a Joby aircraft.
Bonnie Simi is the president of operations at Joby Aviation. She's also a former Olympian luge competitor, but that's another story.
Our use case, of course, is in large cities that are very, very congested. Imagine that you're in a congested city in downtown and you need to get to the airport. Let's say it's in New York City. You would think, okay, if I get into a taxi, it's going to take me maybe 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours, you just don't know. Imagine instead you could pull up an app and select a ride to the airport.
Joby, like other eVTOL companies, is banking on the idea of the air taxi. Founded in 2009, they've raised over $2.5 billion in funding. So far.
As most of you know, the Sega Saturn did not have a very successful run in the United States. The region never took to the Virtua Fighter series, and most of the popular games in Japan were never released there. Sega put a fair bit of resources behind the platform in 1995 and 1996, but by the time 1997 rolled around, the writing was on the wall. Despite being outsold heavily by both Sony and Nintendo that year, lots of great games still made their way out to eager fans. 1997 brought some great games like Super Puzzle Fighter 2, Capcom's Street Fighter themed puzzle game that uses falling gems to attack your foe. It was a great looking game that sported some cool animations and a great soundtrack. Die Hard Arcade also got a release that year, Sega's in-house beat-em-up that was loosely based on the classic film. It enjoyed a fairly popular run in the arcade, so the Saturn version was sought after because of the small amount of games that represented the genre, especially ones that use 3D polygons. The Mega Man series got 2 entries that year, with both 8 and X4 showing up. Both games were great successes on the Saturn, easily rivaling what had been on the PlayStation. Lunacy was a surprise late in the life of the Saturn, a full-motion video game with a spooky and mysterious setting and story. Don't let the looks fool you, this is actually a really good game. The Incredible Fighters Mega Mix made its way to the United States that year, a mix of Sega properties using the Virtua Fighter and Fighting Viper style of gameplay. It was a great game that showed Sega knew how to make something other than bare-bones arcade ports. A handful of really good RPGs made their way out, including both Albert Odyssey and Shining the Holy Ark. While both were quite solid, they couldn't have been more different. Albert Odyssey was a traditional hand-drawn Japanese RPG that looked more like something from the Super Nintendo, while Shining the Holy Ark was a first-person RPG with pre-rendered assets. I really enjoyed them both. Sports games kept coming with the addition of Sega's excellent World Series baseball line, now all the way up to 1998. This one introduced polygon players for the first time. Mortal Kombat Trilogy was an interesting release, combining fighters and elements from a number of games in the series into one package. It was the kind of game you love to get in between the AAA first-party stuff. The 10-player Saturn Bomberman made its debut that year, one of the craziest party games you've ever seen. While most systems had a version of Bomberman to call their own, you had never seen it quite like this. Sonic Jam was there to finally give us a look at a real 3D Sonic world, a bittersweet edition of what could have been. Capcom's Resident Evil graced the platform after delighting PlayStation fans the previous year. It was a good port overall and still captured most of what made the game special in the first place. Capcom also released Marvel Super Heroes, a 2D fighter based on the arcade version. It had its issues with slowdowns, but it was still a great game with some really impressive animation. Last Bronx was released late in the year and really showed us what could have been done with Sega's hardware with 3D fighters. It had taken 2 years, but they had figured out how to get great-looking 3D backgrounds using the VDP-2's abilities. Lobotomy Software got both Duke Nukem 3D and Quake out towards the end of the year, 2 first-person shooters that really blew away the fan base. Neither game should have existed, and yet here they were for our enjoyment. Despite the continued news that Sega was in terrible financial trouble and a replacement was coming much sooner than expected, 1997 had been a great year to own a Saturn. It was a good thing, too, because it all went to hell in 1998. With 1998 coming into focus, it was clear Sega meant to replace the Saturn in the near future. This destroyed its meager market in the United States. While the Saturn had always received less games than the PlayStation, things took a horrific turn for the worst. Almost overnight, the faucet was simply turned off. Sega of America, led by one Bernie Stolar, had basically let everyone know that they were killing the Saturn outright and that only a handful of games were left to be released. Only 2 non-Sega published Saturn games were released that entire year. Electronic Arts had supported the Saturn far more than most people realize. They released more than 24 games and published a few more. The last of the Saturn releases in the US was NHL 98 in January. The series had been immensely popular on the Genesis, so it's no wonder it continued to endure. EA's ports to the Saturn began to deteriorate a bit with the move to 3D players. A game like Madden had 2D sprites for players and the VDP-2 drawing the field, so things typically stayed smooth and played great. Games like NBA Live 98 really began to suffer because it used fully 3D engines that clearly taxed the Saturn a lot more. And with the budget likely being tiny for these ports, it just wasn't a good game. NHL 98, though, managed to stay fairly competitive visually, and even had some nice shadows and player models. The frame rate does get a bit choppy, but never to the point of being unplayable. It's fully licensed and loaded with teams and players you'd expect of the era, and also included a ton of modes and options for you to explore. In fact, from a hardcore fan's perspective, it's the most complete hockey game on the platform. The PlayStation version ran smoother, but the Saturn version definitely sent the series off with a bang.
Tyrion gets shoved by Gilchrist. Hextall passes it. Gilchrist gets the puck to Tyrion. He passes it at center. Codine to the net. Tyrion winds up. Codine passes. Rebound. Brennan saves. He plays
the next release was in February and came from Sega themselves. Winter Heat was sort of a sequel or continuation of Decathlete, a series of Olympic-style sporting events that you compete in to be number 1. Decathlete had been summer games, while this one, of course, covers the winter events. You get to compete in the likes of speed skiing, slalom, skating, bobsledding, and even skeleton. The graphics here are quite a bit more dynamic than what we saw in Decathlete, so it doesn't use the same high-resolution mode. It still looks good, though, and the variety of events really make the replayability sky high. It supports up to 4 players too, so if you have some friends, it makes for one hell of a good party game. It's based on the STV Titan arcade version and is extremely easy to play. Don't let that convince you that it isn't competitive though. My friends and I damn near killed each other over this one. Saturn fans would have to wait all the way until May before they got their next chance to buy a game. And that came in as the classic arcade light gun shooter, The House of the Dead. Sega farmed this port out to Tantalus Interactive, and something must have gone horribly wrong because it's about as ugly as a Saturn game gets. Piss poor textures, models, and a shoddy frame rate all come together to really hurt the overall presentation. But it's a real testament to the appeal of this one because despite the abysmal visuals, it's still really fun to play. They have the core of the content intact, so while it may not look much like the arcade, it manages to play just like it. This really does make a difference in this game's appeal. Unlike Sega's Virtua Cop series, this doesn't use the Saturn's mouse, so if you have an HD TV, play it with the 3D analog control pad. It's much smoother and accurate, though it's still no replacement for a CRT in the Stunner. The Japanese version is dirt cheap compared to the US release, but you do need to contend with some green blood if you go that route. A few days after The House of the Dead was released, the Saturn got Panzer Dragoon Saga, the third and final entry into the Team Andromeda produced series. This one was a big change to the formula we had seen in the first 2 games. They had been on-rail shooters with a sparse story. Team Andromeda turned everything on its head by making this one into a story-heavy, turn-based strategy RPG. You control Edge as he fumbles around in complete ignorance of the world around him. That all quickly changes as you find yourself atop a mighty dragon. From there you explore, battle, and ultimately unlock the key to the mystery of Azel. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret here. I hated this game when I first played it. I wanted another shooter, not some pansy-ass role-playing game. I wanted to attack at will while the screen was spinning and shaking all around me. It would not be until a while later that I actually gave it a real chance, and while I did come to enjoy it, I still don't hold it very high on the Saturn's list of best RPGs. The limited release of this one means that it's not cheap to own today. It's coveted by many a Saturn fan, pushing prices for a US version up around $1,000 or so. About a month after Saga was released, Burning Rangers made its way out in June. This was Sonic Team's final game on the US Saturn, a 3D action platformer that had you exploring burning buildings, saving victims, and battling giant bosses. They used the Saturn to create some impressive fire effects and light sourcing, making you think with another 6 months in the oven, it could have been even more impressive. This game is in terrible need of a remake or a reboot. I really think Sega could do some incredible things with this on modern hardware. Again, the Japanese version is much cheaper, but not having the navigation in English makes for a much harder experience.
Around to the other side of the plant site. Go up.
At the end of July, we got the very last official Sega Saturn release from Sega themselves. Shining Force 3 was a more traditional turn-based strategy RPG and a sequel to the much-beloved games on the Sega Genesis. It now featured a fully 3D environment with 2D sprites for the characters. Battle Scenes switches everything over to 3D polygons and adds cool effects like light sourcing and transparencies. The story takes place around a war that was brought about by sinister forces working it from the outside. Your job is to bring this to light and expose the conspiracy. Of course, the original Japanese Shining Force 3 was broken up into 3 episodes, with the US release only being the first. The other 2 remain Japanese exclusives in regards to official releases, but they did get fan translations some years later. They continued the story from different points of view, though the gameplay and setup remained mostly the same. The US version is expensive, so if you're interested in the series, I highly advise getting the fan translations together and burning them to disk or using an ODE. The final game released for the Sega Saturn in the United States was Magic Knight Rayearth. It was released in the middle of December, and its history is a heck of an interesting story. The original Japanese version was released in August of 1995, quite early in the life of the system. It was developed internally at Sega CS and had both a regular and special edition. Working Designs came in 1996 and wanted to translate the game for the US. The problem was that some of the original source code was lost and they needed to rebuild it. Coupled with some licensing approval issues, it took over 2 years for the game to make its way west. Ironically, what had been an early Japanese game ends up being the last game released for the system at all in the United States. This one is an action-adventure game very similar in structure to the likes of Zelda. Combat takes place in real time while you explore the different areas. It's got beautiful 2D art, some really nice special effects, and it's chock full of voice-acted cutscenes. It was limited in its release, so of course, it's crazy expensive these days. As the Saturn chapter in Sega's history came to a close in the US, it opened up the story of the Dreamcast with a massive mistake right off the bat. With the regular releases for the Saturn market essentially ending with the close of 1997, it meant that Sega had no real presence there for nearly 2 years. Sega was out of sight and out of mind as Sony and Nintendo lapped up former Sega fans by the millions, indoctrinating an entire generation while Sega readied its next hardware. By the time the Dreamcast showed up in September of 1999, there was nothing of substance left of Sega's mighty American empire. Almost immediately, Sony began flooding the gaming media with news of the PlayStation 2's unprecedented power, DVD support, and third-party games you'd never see on Sega's offering. The damage had been catastrophic to Sega's brand, which was already in sharp decline. While I do not presume to know how things would have played out otherwise, I can't help but to feel that with Sega's brand on life support as 1997 closed, taking a 13-month hiatus with next to nothing on the market was a really bad move. There were still many games left in Japan that could have been brought over in small batches to keep the market aware Sega existed, especially since a few of these were some killer fighting games that needed very little in the way of localization. The Saturn went out of the US market the way it had come in. Sega of America wanted nothing to do with it and its customers suffered for it. The effect it had on consumer confidence simply never recovered. The European Saturn market ended in 1998 as well, but it got more games including a handful of exclusives. The Japanese market would go on strong in 1998 before fizzling out in 1999, well after the Dreamcast had already arrived. Sega's strongest market for the Genesis had been the United States, yet it treated that region's customers the worst when it came to the Saturn. There is something to be said about the way a company treats success. but I think it's just as important how it treats a failure. Almost 2 million Americans had stuck with Sega through its ups and downs that generation. And to say thank you, Sega gave us all a big middle finger. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time. Of all the ups and downs that Sega went through as a home console maker, the Dreamcast remains the most interesting to me. There's lots of reasons for that, but none more important than the fact that it ended Sega's run in the hardware business. At the time, it just seemed completely ludicrous that it could fail. It was priced right. It had a game library from the gods. How could a console that was so well received not reach the success that it deserved? I mean, you break down the life of the Dreamcast, and it essentially did everything opposite of the Saturn. It was priced better. It was easier to program for. It had arcade-level power that squashed the competition when it was released. To someone just looking at the game magazines and store shelves, the Dreamcast seemed just as big as anything Sony and Nintendo had gone. When Sega announced it was exiting the console business in 2001, I was truly disappointed. What had started out so positive and full of potential had ended in absolute disaster. In this episode, we will be taking a look at the reasons why Sega failed with the Dreamcast. Did it ever have a chance, or was it doomed from the beginning? Let's take a look and find out. The Dreamcast launched first in Japan on November 27, 1998 for 29,000 yen, just 4 years after the Saturn. Sega had been convinced that Sony overtook them there because the PlayStation was perceived as more powerful and easier to program for. They very much believed that success ran through Japan first and foremost, and with the popularity of Virtua Fighter 3 behind their launch, they were confident the Dreamcast would be an instant hit. This was perhaps one of Sega's biggest miscalculations. By releasing in Japan first, they essentially stopped all Sega Saturn development in its tracks. While Saturn games continued to flow for another year, they were projects that had already been underway. Since Japan had been Sega's strongest territory for the Saturn, many had felt releasing there so early was a big mistake. To make matters worse, Sega's hardware vendors were having a ton of trouble making the chips needed to build the Dreamcast, so system shortages hurt potential sales numbers early on. Sega was unable to take many pre-orders because of this, and for the rest of 1998, they had trouble replenishing stock. Sega also had a huge software problem. While the Dreamcast launched with Virtua Fighter 3 in Japan, it didn't have much else, and high-profile releases like Blue Stinger and Resident Evil Code Veronica were pushed well past their initial release windows. Software was staggered heavily from there, usually no more than a single title seeing release every week. Interest began to lag in Japan as early as March of 1999, so Sega lowered the price significantly in June to just 19,900 yen, which was less than $200 at the time. You don't hear it talked about often, but the Japanese launch had essentially been an overall disaster. The early hardware shortages, the lack of software, and the killing of the Saturn market had all been realities of launching there too soon. Sega had a full 1.5 years head start on the PlayStation 2 in Japan, and it would end up meaning nothing at all. The launch in the US had gone much better. There was a ton of hype around it, the price was great, and the Dreamcast had a seriously impressive amount of software to start. But what you don't often hear about is what the US launch cost Sega. According to parts breakdowns and manufacturing estimates, it cost $250 to make a Dreamcast console from start to finish. That includes parts, housing, putting it together, and getting it in the box. As many of you know, the price in the US was only $199. That meant that Sega lost $50 just to sell you the system. It took Sega less than 3 months to sell 1 million Dreamcast units in the United States with a 3-to-1 software attach rate. But in doing so, the company lost $50 million on the hardware and spent an additional $100 million in advertising, essentially wiping away any potential profits immediately. With Sega already hurting for cash, this is a reality that would do them no favors. Sega was bleeding money and they were losing it faster than they could bring it in.
嗨，大家好，我是西哥。今天我们来跟大家分享什么料理呢？今天我们来跟大家分享我店里的料理，叫做打抛肉便当啊，非常不正宗的打抛肉便当。所以我先跟大家讲，它非常不正宗，因为这是我吃过外面的打抛肉，我稍微自己改良过后，就是我觉得还不错吃的那种口味啦。我记得那时候还卖了大概2-3个礼拜吧，这2-3个礼拜，这个评价很两极啦。啊，老人家觉得太干了。啊，年轻人是觉得还蛮好吃的，还有小孩子也觉得蛮好吃的，但是我还是今天我原汁原味，就是做给大家看。啊，如果你觉得太干的话，你可以加点水，或者是酱油再加多一点，都可以啦。好吧，那我们就废话不多说了，那我们就开始喽。我们来准备打抛肉的配菜，我们来一样来。我们先准备辣椒，这个辣椒要选择不辣的，要完全不辣的那种，我们只要辣椒的香气就可以了。我把它切成小丁，当然不用全部放了，就是我们可能放个几个下去点缀一下，因为全部放看起来有点恐怖啊。辣椒把它切成那种小丁状就可以了。再过来就青葱，青葱也是一样，青葱把它切成一样，都是小丁。切好就是这样子，再过来就是这个不知道是叫青豆还是叫什么豆啊？如果大家知道，请跟我讲一下，因为我也不知道它的学名叫什么。这样子一把可以用很多次，这个拿一根起来就好了。如果是做生意的话，就一次把它切起来了，一样把它切成小丁就可以了。切好了就把它放在旁边，等一下也不一定会全部撒那么多啦，可能也是点缀一下。再一个就蒜头，蒜头是等一下的腌料。蒜头要把它切得非常细啊，如果有果菜汁机的话是最好，把它打成蒜泥，因为蒜泥在调味的话会比较方便。今天我没有果菜汁机啊，所以我就切吧，把它切得越细越好哦，因为等一下要放在绞肉里面去搅拌的。我平常在店里是用果菜汁机打，把它打成蒜泥，大概每次腌肉的话，大概都是用1汤匙到2汤匙左右。如果没有果菜汁机的话，就是像这样子，把它切细一点，放到碗里面。放点水下去，放点水下去，用这个非常不干净的手把它捏一捏啦，尽量把那个蒜头味把它捏出来。虽然不干净啊，但是自己吃的是没有关系啊。像我平常做生意是用果菜汁机打，这样就好，泡着就好了。这就是我们等一下会用到的一些配菜。那我们来腌肉喽。来了，那我们来开始腌肉。先准备一点点的热水，因为我们要融化糖啊。我们加一些糖下去，因为如果单纯不放糖的话，它会有点死咸，这样子会不好吃啊。放点糖下去。如果喜欢吃甜一点的话，你就放甜一点吧。因为这道料理其实失败率很低啊，真的失败率很低。我们就先搅一搅。我们搅完之后就放酱油膏。酱油膏哪一个品牌都可以啦，你要金兰的也可以，万家香的也可以，因为这2种酱油膏是我比较常用在腌肉的，因为它们的味道比较没有这么的重。只是说酱油膏，万家香的会甜一点，金兰的话会稍微咸一点，所以你们自己要注意一下。加点酱油膏下去，搅一搅，先试一下味道。如果太咸的话，你就加点水下去，如果太甜的话，你就加点酱油膏下去，不用客气，这样把它加下去就好了。再过来就准备白胡椒粉， 白胡椒粉少许就可以了。啊，放太多，等一下应该会很辣，所以大家注意一下，不要放太多啊。其实白胡椒粉来一点点就可以了。再过来就准备五香粉，五香粉来一点。最后就把蒜头水跟蒜头一起加上去，我们搅一搅，让它试一下味道。这个味道可以。准备一个锅子，平常的话，我在店里腌的话是腌一整个脸盆，腌完之后把它分装，每一袋的话大概是160克到170克左右，把它放冰箱。那客人要的时候，我再拿出来，直接用水去煮，把它煮干，这样就可以了。来绞肉，还得100块啦。最近肉好像有点贵，里面放点米酒下去，放点米酒下去，再过来就是把腌料慢慢的加下去就好了。腌料不用全下去哦，慢慢的下去哦。颜色还没达到，我们就慢慢加下去。再加下去，应该这样够了。再加下去可能会太咸了，最好让它有点水水的。如果你不知道这个味道到底是太咸还是太甜的话，其实很简单，就用锅子稍微煎一点点。就拿加一点点去煎一煎，试试看它味道，这样就可以了。再过来就是加一点点太白粉下去，一点点就好咯，不用太多。再过来就加点沙拉油下去，一点点就可以了。再把它搅一搅，这个不用搅太久哦，这个只要把它搅均匀就可以哦。因为如果你搅到它粘性出来的话，它会全部粘在一起哦。你要腌个10分钟、20分钟都可以。像我的话，平常是腌到像这样子的话，就把它装到塑胶袋里面，把它铺平，把它冷冻起来。冷冻起来的话，它可以放大概将近快2、3个礼拜都不会坏。这样就完成了，我们就让它腌一下吧。刚刚忘了准备9层塔，9层塔少许就可以，因为这个9层塔是一定要放。好吧，有时间我们就来准备一下打抛肉的一些小菜啊。我们今天准备黄瓜。我们把它切成这种大块的薄片就好了。切黄瓜准备多一点，切这样就可以了。啊，如果要做生意的话，就给个几片意思一下就好了。再过来我们要准备一个沾这个黄瓜的酱汁啊，先去拿一点点的热水。黄瓜要沾什么呢？就是沾一点，也不算是泰式啊。如果是泰式的话，要挤点柠檬。今天我没有准备柠檬，所以我用醋来代替就好了。准备一点温水或者是热水都可以，放点糖下去，最主要吃起来要酸酸甜甜，这样的味道才会开胃。放点糖下去，稍微的搅一下。开店的话就做一大盆出来就好了，啊，让客人自己拿，看他要拿多少就拿多少。还记得西哥的蒜蓉辣椒酱吗？倒一点下去就好，一点点就好哦，不要太多啊。就这么一点点就好了。最后我们再加点醋下去，如果有柠檬汁的话是最好了。柠檬汁的话加下去的话，就真的有点像泰式辣椒酱了。我们今天没有柠檬，所以我们就准备点醋就好了。加点下去好了，试一下味道，吃起来就是有点酸酸甜甜的。其实它这个味道很像外面买的那个泰式辣椒酱，真的你可以回去试试看。它的味道真的很像泰式辣椒酱啊！如果你懒得准备这些的话，你可以直接买一整罐的泰式辣椒酱。像我刚开始在卖这个打抛肉的时候，我也是很懒惰，我都直接用泰式辣椒酱，味道真的还不错，可以试试看。我们来开始炒打抛肉啦，打抛肉饭上面一定会放一个荷包蛋，所以我们要打一颗荷包蛋。或者这个卡式炉的火温不够高啊，所以煎的时间会稍微长一点。大家就忍一下吧。好了，关火，我们把蛋先盛起来。这个锅子就不用洗了，刚刚的打抛肉，像我做生意的话是用160到170克左右啊。我们今天就青菜啦，不用再放油了。 把它炒一炒，它就出油了。我们这种炒法比较不正宗啊，但是味道真的还不错，你真的可以去试试看。这个炒到差不多的话，我们就开始放青葱来点，还有这豆子也放下去。慢慢的炒它，辣椒也来一点吧，好像有点撒的太多了。你看，像它本身就会出水了，就要慢慢给它炒，而且炒起来会很漂亮哦。很多人问我说为什么要放这个豆豆，我也不知道我为什么要放这个豆豆。当初也是无意间把它放进去，觉得还不错吃啊。他们打抛肉还会放番茄啊，像我是没有放番茄啊。如果你们自己喜欢放番茄的话就放啊，因为我这个做的不正宗，所以你们就不要太苛求了。西哥炒起来的打抛肉是比较没有水分的，就是干干的，它吃起来会有点干香干香这样子。好了，我们要起锅，九层塔丢下去，平常在家里煮也可以把它称为一道菜。这样子就是打抛肉，非常简单，对不对？就是这么简简单单，这就是我为大家带来的打抛肉，不正宗的打抛肉。我店里当初就是这样子卖，这样子一盘的话大概是80块钱。再就配一个简单的泰式不正宗酸辣酱。来了，回来了，有点热，就这样简简单单而已。我们来试一下，试一下西哥的打抛肉。哇，非常非常的好吃，真的。你再回去自己试试看啊。黄瓜，蘸一下这个，因为它这个酱汁是有点酸酸甜甜的，非常开胃。鸡蛋也是，蘸这个酸酸甜甜的辣椒酱。吃也吃啊，你看我都吃得满头大汗了，因为我刚刚做完，再吃的话一定会流汗。在家里的话就不用这样子摆盘了啦，就直接炒一盘打抛肉，大家一起吃就好了。好吧，如果还有什么样有一些疑问的，可以留言问我一下，好吧？那我们今天就到这里了。喜欢我的影片，请帮你订阅、分享、按赞、按小铃铛，随时接收我们最新的讯息。跟大家说声拜拜。
我最害怕是什么，知道吗？你会一直到同个地方。
你的人生就是一个伤痕累累，但越挫越勇。
来了，心理不同。
对吧？是不是？
这喷越来越臭。
你们知道最近那个 Netflix 说要收购那个？
收购了？
没有，还没有啊，
收购了，
还在抵抗啊，
还在抵抗。
哦，真的、啊？
对啊，也要对啊，帕拉蒙。
可是 Netflix 已经寄信来说之后，他
对他就打这种战略啊，
他已经寄信来了，我以为他已经确定收购了，
超恐怖的。对啊， 对，川普是有说你不要给我一个垄断哦。收掉 HBO Max， 我也有订阅 HBO Max 然后他说如果继续发展下去，就是他还没有要把两个绑在一起，等于是两个都要跟我收费。
哦，好坏哦。
现在
派拉蒙是哪一家啊？哪一个平台？
这个是什么 Skydance 吗？我是什么？
哦，派拉蒙皮尔 Plus 哦，台湾没有是不是？
对啊，
哦，派拉蒙哦，电影的 IP，
还有是什么？更大的是什么？是什么 Discovery 还是什么吗？反正对啊。
可是他说反合并的话，迪士尼不是已经合并到爆炸吗？
我不知道，
他买了超多
其实现在这样一直买下去，现在是只剩一两个头了吧？
就剩2个啊。Prime 感觉也越来越小了。
对啊。
Prime 对啊，好像就剩 Netflix 跟 Disney Plus。
好可怕哦。
可能台湾呐，可能国外还有一些像 Paramount Plus， 台湾就没有吧。对吧？还有一些什么 Hulu 什么这种东西的，国外 Hulu。
日本的。
Hulu 好像不是日本的，Hulu 是韩国的吗？还是哪里的？
哦。
对，可是现在 Hulu 也在 Disney Plus 里面，就大家都美国起源。
对啊，
就是有各式各样。
收购，接下来应该就是像什么其他的台湾 KKBOX 的嘛。
已经被 Line TV 收了
，Line TV 收，但是他就会再收 Line TV 嘛，他开始侵蚀到更多的。
你说亚洲市场嘛，
对啊，
有可能，如果他们真的想要的话，
打他们频道也有可能。
哇，收吧，快，打包，那个报价单送过去。
多少钱？
可以了，
开个价，来开个价。
哇，我靠 ，Netflix 要收我们收。
这样你要开多少钱？
有什么好讲啊？50亿啊！
棒哦，看得起自己耶。
50亿，然后不出新内容，
好棒哦！
永远都不出新了，很屌啊！
这样不断的这种扩张也是媒体帝国的扩张。但 Netflix 真的太大了，就是使用者太多了，好可怕哦。
它崛起的速度其实很快。
也还好，也好久。
对啊，很久，因为它本来是帮 不是 HBO 那个百视达。
哦，是这个时期开始。
做线上的，我记得线上的什么，好像是租用还是什么的。然后后来就是它变越来越大，然后百视达死掉。
那亚裔呢？
亚裔什么无关？亚裔台湾
多久啊？大学时候
是那个什么得利影视的租片公司，对，出租公司这样。好了，大家
我是康，
我是哈利，
欢迎大家收看。还在家。你感觉是开了夜车回来？你可能是从恒春一路开夜车回到台北，然后直接录音的感觉。司机大姐。哦，第一乐章可以吗？还有第二乐章、第三乐章吗？
这首歌会有20分钟。
古典乐。
好，来吧。
好了，今天要说什么呢？是 QQA 啦，所以我们要来回答大家的问题。好，第一题，阿梅，草莓的莓，女性，31到40岁，从小就发现自己本来要去做的事，中途被命令去做，就完全不想做了啊。比如说，本来我已经有要去洗澡的念头，但家人突然又叫我去洗，就会有点不爽，然后就不想洗了，感觉自己有一些叛逆基因。因为这种感觉并没有随着长大而改善，好奇大家刚刚有没有这种叛逆基因呢？爱你们哦！
爱你哦！
哇，
爱你哦！
这叫唱反调吧？
没有，我完全能够体会他的心情。
唱反调就是叛逆，没错啊。
阿梅，
阿梅。
可是我就是这种。
我比较怀疑是大家难道不是都这种人？
对啊。
就是人家叫你做什么，心里就有一种平某那种事，
你快点睡啊！现在快点睡啊！
就开始划水。
快点睡啊！
Active place for money managers to be based.
I think it's exactly what you said, David. The fact that you have this concentration of very strong research-based, fundamental-based companies. So ourselves, Fidelity, MFS, Adage, Putnam. There's this group of companies, and so what that meant is that we constantly have companies coming into Boston, and that's constant flow of corporations.
Who started Wellington?
The founder of Wellington, we're going to have our 100th anniversary
in 2028 was Walter Morgan. He started the first balanced mutual fund in 1928. That fund now is the Wellington Fund. That is, we manage the fund, and that is a fund that is by Vanguard.
Background for a moment. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a town just south of Boston called Boston, Massachusetts. My parents are immigrants. They both came to Ireland in the 1950s. My father was a bricklayer, raised 6 children. He was a first-generation college student.
So when you were applying to college, where did you want to go?
I ended up going to Wellesley College. I got almost an entire scholarship to go to Wellesley College. I remember having a conversation with my mother and father, and it was about $3,000 or $4,000. That was a lot of money for a bricklayer raising a family of 6 children. But he knew, and they knew, that Wellesley would open doors for me.
What did you major in at Wellesley?
I majored in economics. It was an all-women's college. Well, economics was one of the most, I think it was one of the largest majors at the time. My mother, being from an immigrant family, they didn't know what economics was, so they kind of steered me towards computer science.
So you got a job at Wellington, and did your parents understand what it was, and did you tell them it was a great job?
My parents didn't understand what it was, but I was very interested in the business. I started as an administrative assistant, so I started at the very lowest part of Wellington, but a recruiter had told me, don't worry about the title. This is a great firm. The culture is amazing. You're going to have lots of opportunity.
Right. And so was it filled with women with senior responsibilities at the time, or was it all male dominated then?
So if you go back to the industry in the early 1990s, most of the people, particularly the investors, were men. But I would say we had quite a number of female role models on the business side. But when I started, I was always in research, in the research department. It was I was one of very few women.
And did you ever think you could be the CEO?
No.
Okay, so what area did you specialize in? Was it ultimately health?
Well, I started in 1991. In 1993, I had the great opportunity to go and work with Ed Owens. So Ed Owens was my mentor and great friend for 20 years. He was the pharmaceutical and biotechnology analyst. He managed the Vanguard Healthcare Fund. And so I got to go and work with him starting in 1993. And it was just a match made in heaven in terms of allowing me to really learn how to be a great analyst in biotech and pharmaceuticals. So most of my career was focused on analyzing and recommending and investing in biotech and pharmaceutical companies.
When did you realize that you had a chance to advance and you weren't just going to be there for 1 or 2 or 3 years, but you could actually stay there your whole career? At what point did you realize you were pretty good at this?
I had a very slow start and then an acceleration. I started as an administrative assistant. A few years in, Wellington was a very flat organization, and they created what is now we consider a research associate position for me. So I was just constantly learning. I was learning to be a great researcher. I was working with someone who was amazing. Eventually, I started having success in recommending stocks. So I had this luxury of 4 or 5 years of really learning to be a great researcher. But because I came from an administrative position, I think it took time for people to sort of gain confidence in me and me to gain credibility. But once I really sort of came out of Ed's umbrella and really began to be my own person who was recommending stocks, then sort of the advancement happened faster.
And so did you, at what point after you're there 5 or 10 or 15 years, did you say, hey, I could be the CEO?
Probably around 2008, I was very interested in leadership. So there's a big gap between being interested in being CEO and being interested in leadership. I started getting asked to be on committees. I started being asked. I moved to London. I moved my family to London in 2007 as we were globalizing our investment platform. When I think about that period of time, that was my real journey on being a leader.
All right, so you come back eventually from London, and then you realize you're maybe on a track to get to the top. And how many years before you became CEO?
When Ed retired, I became team leader of the healthcare team. That's like running a little business within Wellington. And the healthcare team is a very important team at Wellington. I became a managing partner. Wellington is a private partnership. We're governed by 3 managing partners. And it was elected a managing partner by our partnership in 2014.
When you meet clients around the world, do they ask you where the economy is going or how Wellington's doing? What is the thing that they want to know the most about?
I think what they want to know the most about, because they know my areas of expertise as well, is what are your investors saying about the world? So they're very interested in that, and they're also very interested in trends, like what are other clients thinking about? So we have lots of discussions about what areas of the market are most interesting, where are the areas of opportunity, what's our product capabilities, and what are other clients interested in doing as well.
You're not making the day-to-day investment decisions today, but how do you keep up with what your investment professionals are doing? You just look at what their performance is. How do you deal with the investment professionals, or somebody else that does that?
We have a management team that manage our investors, but as a managing partner, I'm responsible for the compensation of all our partners and managing directors at year end. So I study, our individual investors' performance quite intensely, particularly at our year end compensation process. So I feel it's very important to stay very connected to the investment process and very connected to the talent. We're a talent organization, and those who are making the decisions for our clients. If you want to be an investor, make sure you're very curious, make sure you're constantly learning, make sure you're learning the skills of the future.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Savannah.
Welcome back to the opening trade. Watch Bloomberg Tech. This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg Television.
Now, some people in the money management world would say we're doing good things for the world. Other people who are not in the money management world would say all you're doing when you're money management is getting rich people, making them wealthier. So how do you say to people who are joining your firm, in the money management world, you're doing something that's socially productive and useful? How do you explain that?
So I think what's our mission and purpose as a company and as an industry, I think it's underappreciated, that back to that compounding. What we're really doing for our clients is in the end, we're helping their beneficiaries. We're allocating capital to the world, right? And so if we do a really good job, our number one mission is outcomes for clients. Sort of a secondary mission is allocating capital so the world can grow and be innovative.
So if somebody came to you and said, I have $1 million and I don't really know what to do with it, what do you tell people to do?
I think most importantly, it's how do you get access to the economy? So how do you get access to income, depending on if you want some income and diversification? In the end, when you're investing in the growth of the world and the economy of the world. So how do you find those avenues so that you can benefit from that innovation?
What is the best investment advice you ever received from somebody about how to invest? Your mentors, other people, what's the best you ever got?
I think it's advice, and it's also just osmosis of working with Ed Owens for so long, and he was an incredibly, I would say, voracious learner. So just constantly learning, that would be one. He was also just very humble. So one of the things we say at Wellington, we're not a star culture. The two combinations of being great investors are being super curious, being humble, and being resilient. He never got too attached to a stock, so he was constantly taking in new information and pivoting if he had to.
What do you think is the most common mistake that investors make?
Well, you probably know this over time, the noise in the market, the constant data has changed the investing in 2025 versus what it was in 2010, and even in if you go back to my first
range and penetration.
The only thing it's not quite so great at is weight. Enter the DJI O4 Air Unit Lite at just 13-ish grams for the Air Unit and the camera. But the biggest limitation of the O4 Lite, and this is the one that's a deal breaker for a lot of people, including, depending on which side of the bed I got up on, me, is the field of view. You see, the field of view on the O4 Lite's camera is only 117 degrees. And that kind of looks okay here when I'm just holding it, but compare it to a normal FPV camera. Just compare that to the 155-degree field of view of the O4 Pro. This is much more typical of what FPV pilots expect. And this difference is not just like theoretical. It's not just a number on a page. That narrower field of view means that when you're flying in proximity to objects, whether you're doing like a Cinewhoop move inside a tight room of a house, or whether you're racing or doing freestyle and you're trying to like apex a turn when you're racing, or you're trying to do some kind of freestyle trick where you need to look back or look around, whenever you're trying to align yourself close to another object, especially at speed, that narrow field of view makes it much, much harder to do. But Flywoo has an answer. This is the original lens that comes on the O4 Lite camera, and this is the product that we're looking at today. It's an aftermarket lens that you, or Flywoo will do it for you, put onto your O4 Air unit that gives 155-degree field of view for the O4 Lite, the same as the O4 Pro. So does that mean that the last major deal breaker for the O4 Lite has finally been resolved, and I can recommend it wholeheartedly? Surely it won't turn out like that. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. The first thing I need to make clear is that this is not the same product that you may have seen advertised previously. Flywoo makes a product that is basically just a wide-angle lens that slides over the existing O4 Lite lens. I don't have that to show you, but it gave you a wider field of view, but also you could see the lens in the edges of the screen, and it had a lot of problems with lens flare and glare because of light bouncing around inside the system. This is a completely new product that completely replaces the factory lens on the O4 Lite. The wide-angle lens comes mounted in this plastic housing, and you basically take the factory lens off your O4 Lite and put the O4 sensor and circuit board in the back and glue it in. I'm actually going to be doing that with the O4 Air unit here in this tiny trainer a little later in the video. But if you don't feel like doing that, you can buy this lens for the brave of heart who want to save money and do it themselves. You can buy the camera pre-mounted in the lens, ready to go, and then you just unplug your existing camera and plug it in. Or if you really just have more money than time, you can buy a whole O4 Lite Air unit with the wide-angle camera pre-installed. There's 3 different product SKUs, and Flywoo will sell you whatever you want. By the way, in case you hadn't guessed already, there are links to these products down in the video description below. They are affiliate links. If you love this product, if you want to buy it, please go click that link. It means a lot. I get a little commission, obviously. That's why it means a lot when you click that link before you do any purchasing. By the way, Flywoo has O4 Pro Air units that they ship to the United States. And I hear even that people are getting them and not being charged tariffs. I cannot personally verify that, as I have not done it myself, but they definitely have O4 Pros in stock at the time that I'm making this video. They just put it in a Flywoo box. And then, oh, it's a Flywoo. And then US Customs lets it through. So if you're trying to order O4s, go click my affiliate link and go buy some O4s from Flywoo. Okay, back to the product. The Flywoo kit fixes another problem that the O4 Lite has, which is that its camera is a weird size. In fact, if you look closely, you can see that I have mine installed, quote unquote, in this tiny trainer with a big hunk of double-sided tape, alien tape, because it doesn't actually fit the standard mounting. Flywoo includes these adapter plates. This one adapts to, I believe it is an 18 millimeter. I don't know why it's 18 and not 19 millimeters, because standard micro cameras are 19 millimeters, but it just slides in there and screws in. Jesus Christ, Bardwell. Get it together. Get it together, Bardwell. There we go. So it screws in. You can see these 2 screw holes just settle down in there. And then this is a standard mounting hole, and this will mount in a standard 19 millimeter bracket for a typical micro camera. Or if if you have a frame that takes the 04 or 03, this adapter adapts it to fit the 04 or 03 if you have a larger frame that's made for that camera. So really, we're closing the gap here. We've got the field of view of an 04 or an 03, and we've got a mounting solution. I wouldn't be surprised if Flywu sells these adapters separately as well, because that's the kind of thing people who have an 04 Lite probably want to buy. I'll take a look, and if I can find it, I'll put a link to that in the video description below also. I've taken the camera out of the quadcopter, and while I have got it out, I've taken a minute to put some E6000 on this connector. That's a recommended practice. That's where the 04 Lite camera often breaks, is at the connector. Not necessarily at the connector itself, but where the connector attaches to the circuit board is relatively weak. And it's best practice to reinforce that with, well, you're supposed to use E7000 or B7000. I don't know why. I think it has a little bit higher heat tolerance, but I have E6000. Just go search E6000 adhesive. I have it already, so I've gone ahead and used it. Hopefully, I don't think it's fully dried. Hopefully I won't get it all over myself. But basically what we need to do is pop this off. That's just friction fit, so I'm just going to pry at this little ear here. And likewise, there we go. Remember this from when I first got my 04 Lite. It comes with this cover disconnected. And then we take the lens off the circuit board. How do we do that? If I just pull it in? I don't know. Well, I guess, you know, he who dares wins, they say. I don't exactly know who says that. I've just heard it said. And it's on there pretty good. How do you get it off? How to replace 04 Lite camera lens.
To replace the lens on your DJI 04 FPV camera,
Unclip the old lens. I just unclip the old one. Just unclip the old one. Everybody's like, you just take it off. Nobody's, how do you take it off? I can see from the factory lens that they included that it's been like just gouged and pried at. So apparently that's how you get it off. Yeah, it looks like it had adhesive around the outsides, and then you just gouge at it until it comes off. Okay. Well, I guess that's what I'm gonna do. Hopefully I don't break this. Guess I got spares if I do break it. What if I just, like, it's really on there. How do you, I want to just rip the sensor off. I don't know, man. Oh, I got it to move. Yes. 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 Just come in with a utility knife at the corner and pry, and it popped right off. And if I destroyed anything, it doesn't look like it. It looks like you got a little breathing room around the outside. All right, well, there you go. Okay, so then you take this lens, right? I don't think there's an up or a downside to it. And it's just going to go on. And then what holds it in? It just pops in. Does it just pop in and friction fit? It seems like it does. And the Flywu instructions say to glue it in. I'm not exactly sure what kind of glue would be best to do that with, but it seems like it's in there pretty good. So maybe for now I'll just friction fit it. The Flywu one, yeah, I see. It does have a little bit of adhesive here at the corner, holding it in some way. I don't know what kind of adhesive that might be, though. I guess more E6000? Maybe hot glue. Maybe hot glue. At least hot glue you can release if you need to. Seems like it's in there pretty good. For now, I think I'm just going to friction fit it. And, like, if I push on it, will it come out? I don't know. Well, maybe tape. Maybe just a little tape across the back. Just because I'm not sure the right way to do it. I'm not going to, like, do something permanent or tell you guys to do something permanent that then causes damage. Yeah, there's plenty of room here. And then on top of that, we're going to stuff it in the adapter. Great. Then for this canopy, I think we need the 19mm. Yeah, it's going to be the 19mm adapter, or 18mm, whatever. This is going to just slide on in. It's got a little slit here for the MIPI cable. It looks like it actually reinforces the MIPI connector a little bit, so that's good. There you go, and in fact, I suspect that is going to actually get glued together because there's wet E6000 in there, so that's never coming out again. Maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe I should let that E6000 dry. I'll let the E6000 dry, and then I'll put it in. So, having put the camera into this bracket and put the screws in, I now am completely unconcerned about gluing the board into the back of the lens because this thing sandwiches together pretty tight. In fact, I had to I got a lens cleaning cloth and I just literally squeezed to get the last screw holes to line up. It is squeezed in there real freaking good. Also, I screwed up and this is now coming out the front instead of coming out the back. And I'm really on the fence as to whether I'm even going to bother fixing that. I probably should. I got to take out these screws and I got to fix it. So don't do that. And now I am realizing that the Tiny Trainer canopy is not in fact sized for a 19mm camera. It just starts to go in there and then it doesn't go the rest of the way in. So now I have to take this off and now maybe I should glue the board in. And now I have managed to extract it back out of the bracket.
Sometimes technology dies because a company goes out of business or it's old and people just move on to a new system. But sometimes technology dies because of corporate greed and forced obsolescence. And it's a lesson millions of Google customers, like me, learned this year when their Nest smart home thermostats suddenly turned dumb. And Google pushed owners to spend $150 to buy a new thermostat, even when the old one worked perfectly fine. So yeah, let's dive into some of the drama of the past year and look back on the tech that died in 2025. You see, it's a way to pay our respects to old gadgets and services, and hopefully, by confronting the grief, it'll be a little therapeutic. Let's start back in February, when Apple officially killed off the iPhone home button. When Apple launched the iPhone 16e, it stopped selling the budget-friendly iPhone SE, and that was the last iPhone that Apple sold that had a home button. That same month, it also marked the end of the Humane AI pin. The wearable was a failure right from the start. When it launched, it cost about $700. It invoked this Star Trek communicator badge idea, but it did not work well. It overheated, and it relied on hand gestures as it projected an image on your open palm. The AI also just wasn't good, and it's not worth the effort when phones in our hands are just so much easier to use. Now, our review was back in April 2024, but less than a year later, in February, is when it became a paperweight with the hardware no longer working, data was deleted, and the rights were sold to HP. We also said see ya to the Amazon App Store. Did you forget Amazon had its own App Store? Amazon closed its App Store for Android and Windows. It also ended the Amazon Coins program. That was a credit to spend in the Amazon App Store to lure you away from Google Play when you needed apps for your Fire tablet or your Fire Stick. But at least Amazon said it would refund any unused coins previously purchased. February was brutal because it also was when Microsoft announced it was shutting down Skype. And after 22 years of this sound, it finally hung up on all calls in May. Skype helped put video calling on the map. It got people connected via internet back when international calls were hard to make. But nostalgia and brand identity was not enough for Microsoft to keep it. And instead, the company said it wanted to focus all of its video chat business on Microsoft Teams. So now everything is Teams. Well, the loss of Skype to me is not as big as another thing Microsoft killed, because Microsoft killed the thing that killed your computer. It killed The blue screen of death. It's the critical stop error, the system crash that shows white text on a bright blue screen. It warns you that the computer has to shut down to recover, and you're praying to God you can recover your work. It's the moment where the air leaves your lungs and your heart sinks to the pit of your stomach, and you turn just as blue as the screen, realizing that you may have lost everything. It traumatized multiple generations over 40 years. Because everyone gets this message right before big projects do. Sometimes it happens because of malware or a corrupt file, but over the years, Windows got a little nicer about it. It added a frowny face to replace some of the doom and gloom lines of code. So yeah, Microsoft's putting the screen of torment to rest. But this is what bothers me. It's not like Windows crashes won't happen anymore. Rather, it's just they won't be blue. There's a new black screen. It just says, your device ran into a problem and needs to restart. It's too gentle if you ask me. Panic attacks and recovery disks build character. This list just keeps getting sadder, folks, because 2025 is also the year AOL pulled the plug on dial-up internet service. Cue the sound of my online youth. Well, that symphony of the telephone line is now a relic of the past. AOL, or its legal name, America Online, launched a dial-up service 34 years ago when you used a phone line to get on the World Wide Web, and you were charged by the minute, and you would buy these big...
Many of the genres that transitioned from 2D to 3D underwent many changes in how they looked and played. Racing games were among the most radical transformations during the time. Most had been simple overhead affairs, or games that used some combination of hardware or software sprite and background scaling. When 3D polygons showed up, all of a sudden, we had tracks with real elevation changes, cars with real damage modeling and physics. Things went from very simple to much more realistic pretty damn quickly. In fact, the genre itself had been stagnant for years for me, and all of a sudden, they were the games I looked forward the most to playing on my 32-bit machines. Software developers didn't waste time advancing the technology either. While the beginning of the polygon boom was mostly arcade-like racers, we quickly evolved into more simulation-like games that really added a lot of stuff we'd never seen before. In this episode, we will be taking a look at my top 10 racing games for the Sega Saturn. I didn't set out to be different or include variety here. I genuinely tried to list the games that I simply had the most fun with and played the most often. I've also added sections for honorable mentions and one for disappointments. So sit back, relax, and get ready for some top-notch 32-bit action. There were a lot of good racing games on the Saturn, so I decided to add a space for a few games that didn't quite make my top 10, but are still very much worth playing. While it had its issues, Hang On GP could be a lot of fun if you had the right setup. This one plays so much better with an analog wheel or controller, so if you've never tried it with those, be sure you do. It has an especially good soundtrack, and while the graphics aren't incredible, they do enough to make it feel like a step above the stuff you saw on the 16-bit machine. Scorcher was a futuristic racing game where you had sort of an anti-gravity motorcycle that controlled a bit like a ping-pong ball. The graphics were really good and it ran at an impressive clip. I always wanted to be good at this game, but it definitely takes a certain level of commitment to get there. There's a great racer here if you can meet its challenge. Street Racer was a nice throwback title on the Saturn. It took the type of visuals you saw on the Mega Drive and then cranked them up with more special effects and more detail on the screen. The end result was one of the prettiest kart racers you've ever seen, and it didn't play half bad either. How this game isn't more popular is beyond me. Our final honorable mention is Grand Chaser, also known as Cyber Speedway. I wanted to throw a little love this game's way because it was early in the system's life, and I actually imported it at the Japanese launch. So I was playing it well before most of the other games you'll see in this video. It's not the best looking or playing game, but it had a wow factor that early that you really have to appreciate. Later games would really outclass it, but for a time, I had a lot of fun with it. No question we all had our letdowns during the life of the Saturn. A lot of appreciate. Later games would really outclass it, for that or see, it's a nice futuristic track and setup. There were racing games on the Saturn, so I decided to add a space for a few games that didn't quite make my top 10, but are still very much worth playing. While it had its issues, Hang On GP could be a lot of fun if you had the right setup. This one plays so much better with an analog wheel or controller, so if you've never tried it with those, be sure you do. It has an especially good soundtrack, and while the graphics aren't incredible, they do enough to make it feel like a step above the stuff you saw on the 16-bit machines. Scorcher was a futuristic racing game where you had sort of an anti-gravity motorcycle that controlled a bit like a ping pong ball. The graphics were really good and it ran at an impressive clip. I always wanted to be good at this game, but it definitely takes a certain level of commitment to get there. There's a great racer here. Love this game's way because it was early in the system's life and I actually imported it at the Japanese launch. So I was playing it well before most of the other games, the unforgettable Sega Rally. But things had gone horribly wrong. Whereas Sega Rally had a smooth-running, great-looking graphics engine, Sega Touring Car had been a mess. It hitches regularly, doesn't look as good, and I've always felt that Andretti Racing was one of the great unsung 32-bit racing games. Mixed with both dread and fascination. Part of me wanted to see how it turned out, and part of me was repulsed by the idea of yet another terrible port. But you know what? Wipeout on the Saturn ended up being a very decent racing game. It doesn't look or run quite as smoothly as the PlayStation version, but what is here still plays well and has a bunch of reasons why it's still worth a go. It's got way more tracks than any version of the game before it. And it also has carts that you can use to get the hang of the game. Just enough to make it easy to jump into, and not enough to scare away the casuals. A lot of people may disagree, but I really enjoyed the improvements that the Need for Speed received in its Saturn update. There were more tracks, it ran better, and the control was way more forgiving. I had enjoyed the 3DO version very much and was happy to see that the
这个粉丝要求的，其实我是不太想要做这一集的，因为我光要研究这个卤肉，我永远记得我胖了8公斤。这8公斤不止血压上升，医生跟我讲说要减肥，再外就是坐骨神经痛。我上个月研究的，其实我一直没有想要教大家，因为它真的很容易让人家发胖啊。那时候1个半月都在吃卤肉饭，胖8公斤，所以才会导致什么坐骨神经痛。最近有慢慢的瘦下来，所以脚也慢慢的比较好一点，比较没这么麻了。好吧，那我们就开始了。那我们来开始介绍肉。像我们今天准备的是有肥有瘦的，还有带皮的肉。像这种肉的话，要请猪肉摊帮你留啊。这种肉并不好买了，因为大部分都已经被卖卤肉饭的店或者餐厅给订走了，所以你要提前先跟猪肉摊讲。而且这个肉价钱还不便宜。像我们今天准备的是1斤的肉。所以我们等下会用1公斤的肉，所有的配方、所有的比例都是用1公斤来算，就是1000克啦。我们要准备把它穿烫一下哦。这个肉有冰冻过，我怕它会有一些骚味，所以我们要稍微处理一下。那我们现在把它穿烫一下，冷水下锅，2根青葱把它下去，姜片3片，再过来就是米酒，米酒把它倒一些下去。平常如果自己去菜市场买温体的话，就不用这样做了。 如果这个肉买不到的话，可以用3层的，可是3层的成本太高了，做生意不太适合。来吧，那我们就慢慢让它煮咯。水滚的时候，我们就把它稍微的煮一下，煮个2、3分钟也好。把一些猪肉烧的味道把它煮出来。好，那我们关火咯。穿烫完的肉燥要稍微洗一下，稍微洗就好了，你不用洗得太久啊，抽一下水就好了。那我们现在开始要来把它稍微炒过一下，把它的猪油把它炒出来，这样吃起来才不会有油腻感。来，我们来炒一炒吧。慢慢炒哦，给它慢慢炒，你会发现油越来越多了。我们把一些肥的地方的油把它炒出来啊，我看到这个油有没有很多？我们再炒，把它炒的油把它炒多一点出来。这样吃起来才不会很油腻啊！好，炒完之后你会发现好多油啊。等一下我们把肉燥捞起来，留下油就好了。开火，我们来炸红葱酥。刚刚的猪油把它倒进来，再过来加点沙拉油下去。要稍微多点油哦。再过来，咱们要炸红葱酥啊！要炸红葱酥的话，火温不能太高，中小火就好。如果懒得炸的话，就直接买现成的也可以。炸红葱酥火温不可以太高哦。而且要不断的搅拌哦。红葱已经开始变色喽，这个时候就要关火喽。好，关火。我们把红葱给它捞起来。炸好的红葱酥就是这样子，你放着，它等下还会继续炸哦。所以要稍微松开一点。好，那我们放着就好了。刚刚不好意思啊，刚刚麦克风没有开了，我重新的稍微讲解一下。先把糖放下去炒啊，炒完之后放上2/3的酱油，继续炒。再过来我们要加入半碗的硬油膏，硬油膏大卖场都有卖。再过来加入米酒半碗。蒜头2颗，把它切成细末，把它丢进去，姜片1片就好了。红葱酥我们先放一点点下去，加水，腌过肉就可以了。滚了之后，我们就转小火，盖锅盖，煮1个小时。1个小时到了，我们把它打开来，把最后的红葱全部加进去，盖锅盖，我们再煮个10分钟到15分钟。如果想要再软烂一点的，煮久一点都没有关系。时间到了。把它打开来，这就是卤肉饭。 好，我们关火了，我们把它盛起来。这个卤肉饭已经煮完了，颜色很漂亮哈。西哥今天没有煮白饭啊，所以没办法吃给大家看。这个颜色真的很漂亮啊，都还不错啊。如果喜欢软烂一点的话，可以继续煮啊，煮久一点，味道会越好哦。我们回来了，有时间的话，卤肉就把它再卤久一点。因为今天拍节目，所以没有时间卤啊，我只能把一些东西告诉你们而已。有时间就放着它一直卤，卤了2、3小时，像人家做生意都卤了2、3小时啊，那个吃起来味道才会好吃啊。再过来就是酱油、跟硬油还有糖，这3个比例你们再自己去调整啊。因为有的酱油会非常咸，有的硬油会非常咸，这时候你就糖就稍微要加多一点点。如果有的酱油不是这么咸，还有硬油不是这么的咸，那你的糖就不要加太多了，就把它减少。像如果一般外面在做生意的话，糖是加的非常少啊，因为它会有点咸这样子，因为配饭嘛，越咸当然是越好吃啊。还有就是硬油，硬油一定要买西螺产的，硬油加下去的话，它有一个独特的酱香味，吃起来就特别的香啊。我不会讲，因为它就是一个特别的味道。好吧，那我们今天就到这里。喜欢我的影片，请帮我订阅、分享、按赞、按小铃铛，随时接受我们最新的信息。跟大家说声拜拜。嗨，大家好，我是西哥。今天我们来跟大家分享什么料理呢？今天我们来跟大家分享一个家常的料理，就是简单的炸酱面啊。炸酱面的话是今天我老婆想中午要吃啊。因为我们现在人在店里，等一下我煮完茶之后，再利用一点时间来煮炸酱面，所以今天的话应该不会是很正宗的炸酱面啦，就是一个很家庭版、很快速、很简单，就可以很容易上手的一个炸酱面。好吧，那我们就废话不多说了，那我们就来开始吧。来吧，那我们来准备一下那个简单的炸酱面的一些配料，蒜头啊，蒜头几颗就好了啊。把它切成碎末，他们有的会说是蒜脆，我是觉得都可以啦，反正把它切小就好了啦。再是红葱头啊，如果没有红葱头的话，你可以用洋葱代替也可以，只是说红葱的味道会比较重，洋葱的话就比较没有这么重的味道啊，就看个人喜欢啦。一样把它切小、切碎，有切就好了啦，因为自己吃的比较没有这么讲究啊。再来是青葱，哦，最近这个青葱特别贵，又贵又老的，一点点就要50块了。一样，我们把青葱都把它切成碎末，葱切完了，我们把它放在旁边备用。我们来准备炸酱面的调味料，第一个就是豆瓣酱，豆瓣酱你可以选择辣味的跟不辣味的，随便你，哪一家品牌都可以啊。1汤匙的豆瓣酱，再就甜面酱，甜面酱大概也是1汤匙啊，它们的比例大概都1:1啊。再过来就是酱油或者是酱油膏。像我今天选用的是酱油膏啊，再来我们就加入一些糖，这个糖的话，等一下在煮的时候也可以加，就是慢慢加了。我们一开始先给它有一个味道了。再来，他们有的会加入老抽，增加那个炸酱的颜色。像我们就没有老抽，我们就不增加了。我们就把它搅一搅，等一下我们在炒的时候就比较不会手忙脚乱。再过来就是准备绞肉。或者是3层肉，如果你是买3层肉的话，你要自己回来切丁啊。像我今天是比较懒，我就使用绞肉，因为我今天没有时间去菜场买，所以在超市买。好吧，那我们来开始炒炸酱了。好了，我们来开火了。今天的油要稍微多一点点哦。绞肉下了，家庭版的就比较随便了。 不锈钢锅就是如果热度不够的话，它就很容易粘锅，但是我都不会管它的啊。这个我们就加入红葱头跟蒜头一起加入。这块就是调和好的炸酱，我们慢慢加，先加一半下去。看起来这个颜色还不够深哦，那我们就全加了。等一下应该会很咸。这块就加水下去了，青葱也下去了，我们就全部都下去了，我们完全不讲究了。滚了之后就让它煮吧。如果你想要肉燥软一点的话，你就把它煮久一点。如果我们要急着吃饭的话，就随便炒一下，把水炒干就可以了。因为今天做的比较简单的，家庭版的啦，就没有什么要求啊。你待会把水煮干就可以了。刚刚忘了加米酒，那我们现在补加一下米酒。因为西哥有时候年纪大，会常常忘东忘西啊。水都已经煮到快要干了啦。现在我们要勾芡啦，你要勾芡也可以，你不要勾芡也可以，都可以，随便你。像我们今天稍微勾芡一下。好，这样就完成了炸酱了，简单的炸酱，把它起锅了。刚刚我们把它煮完了啦，就很简单的家常的炸酱面，就是很简单。啊，记得炸酱面的上面一定要有一点点油，这样吃起来会比较好吃。来，西哥来试一下，这个是我跟我老婆的中餐啊。可是这样买起来很像比外面买的还要贵，这样不知道划不划算哦。可是最近肉比较贵了。我帮我老婆用一点。来，阿玉，你的炸酱面。来，这就是我为大家带来的炸酱面啊。不好意思，因为这个煮完之后，这个面哦有点点时间了，所以它都粘在一起了。它这个炸酱哦，它煮出来它会有一点点咸，要注意哦。啊，如果没有，
The way it's performing.
Duolingo at its core is this amazing machine of learning. We envision this limitless future that we want to build. And my job is to make sure everyone knows where we're standing today. What are our resources and capabilities today? And then strategically, how do we link those together? And I think that is really the basis of what a strategic CFO is, and that's what the role has become.
Duolingo runs on the freemium model. It offers language lessons at no cost, but adds features for people who pay. Free has translated into robust annual user growth. Converting free users to paid subscribers is the ultimate goal, but it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Our free product is essentially our growth engine. I mean, it's the way we grow is people use it for free, and then they tell their friends, and then maybe one of their friends will subscribe. So I don't want to screw up the free product. I don't think it'll ever be the case that that the majority of our users are paying.
The conversion piece is one part of a relatively complex system. Luis talks about our business as having 3 almost equal tranches. We have a group of folks who are trying to bring users to the platform and then engage them enough to keep them on the platform. We have a group of people who are trying to make sure that it is teaching really effectively all of the things we're trying to teach. And then it has a group of people who are trying to convert free users to paid. And they're about a third in terms of headcount and really investment. Got way focused on conversion at the expense of growth or learning. The whole system would not grow as nicely as we want.
So far, the company's kept its subscription menu fairly simple, offering 2 tiers as well as a family plan.
Would there be a way to bring in more subscribers or bring in more revenue if you offered more than 3 different tiers?
The way we pass people through the funnel is complex. It is based on your usage experience, where you're at in your learning journey, where you're at geographically. We're trying to optimize for something called the lifetime value of the subscribers on the platform. We're trying to nudge people towards a product that will deliver them value and be higher LTVs.
That nudge towards Duolingo's premium max tier got a lot more emphatic in late 2024, when the company used AI to give its character Lily the power of conversation.
Introducing Video Call, a new way to practice your language skills.
How's your job going?
Hey Lily, it's going super well.
What's your favorite thing about work these days?
Probably my colleagues. I really like working with them.
That sounds like my nightmare.
We didn't have that core feature that we could organize behind until the fall of last year when we launched Video Call.
안녕하세요. 잘 지냈어요?
That feature sold itself. You didn't have to explain to someone what it was. It was very clear. You're going to have a video conversation with someone, and that is when we saw max penetration really take off.
You've been talking about studying, working with AI for, at this point, more than 2 decades.
Yes.
How groundbreaking is Lily?
I would have never imagined 10 years ago that it was going to take only 10 years to get to a point where you could practice an actual conversation with an AI. In fact, 4 years ago, it was out of the question.
Salut, comment ça va?
Bien Lily, comment ça va?
Lily's conversations are enabled by commercial AI programs. So while an increase in max subscribers drives gross revenue higher, added expenses eat into margins. It's a burden Duolingo's willing to bear for now, and they insist it'll soon get lighter.
We are really excited that we're at a moment in time where, as one of our financial analysts pointed out, we might be the best example of a company that's monetizing AI and consumer internet right now. Our thesis remains intact that on a per unit basis, the cost of the AI intelligence will come down over time.
In the last 18 months, we've seen AI prices come down precipitously. Foundation models are becoming the fastest depreciating asset class on the market right now. So look at OpenAI's GPT-4 as one example. Over the last 2 years, you've seen prices come down 90% for that model. That's cost per token, it's the cost to run that model. We're seeing the closed source and open source gap close, which makes these models a lot more accessible. So we're really seeing a perfect storm for AI models right now.
The main goal is to make Max and Lily even more engaging. And we think if we do that, we have a big opportunity to monetize that over time.
Duolingo preserves capital to invest in AI by keeping marketing costs to a minimum, relying on word of mouth and social media instead of paid advertising.
I'm reporting live from Duolingo's funeral.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
We just did this campaign where our mascot died. That campaign cost us like $10,000, like nothing. It cost us nothing.
I wanted to see how many of you would bother to bring me back to life.
We inject ourselves into the social conversation across a variety of platforms across the world in a way that's authentic and organic. There's a couple things you don't actually see in our social media. You don't see a call to action. There's no subscribe now, because we're really just trying to be authentic in a conversation.
So if you don't have a call to action, how do you quantify the impact of a campaign like that? How do you measure it?
We have a variety of techniques, survey techniques, and other attribution techniques to do it. I mean, we saw for when Duo faked his death, you can track it from number of interactions on social platforms. In this case, it was over billions. Once we get that user, we are able to offer them multiple bites at the apple to subscribe, because they stay around for a long period of time and they leave the platform and come back. So we are going to have a long-term relationship with this user. The marketing efficacy is over a really long period of time, which is very valuable to us.
Duolingo's strategy is borne out by its dominant share of the language learning market. And that market is projected to boom over the next decade, giving the company even more territory to penetrate.
This is a really huge potential market. If you look at just language learning in general, 80% of the spend is people who are learning English. It's under 50% of the spend for us is learning English. So there's a large gap there that we can fill. So big opportunity.
One tool to take advantage of this opportunity is the Duolingo English Test, or DET. It's Duolingo's third largest revenue stream, and it underpins a long-term plan.
The DET is a very important part of our strategy to become the proficiency standard.
We help certify formally for hundreds of thousands of people every year that their English proficiency is good enough to go to college or go to university somewhere in the world. And if we can then integrate that into the app, and we've started to in some courses where we put a Duolingo score, then you can merge these two ideas and you can help become the proficiency standard. You want to eventually imagine a world where people are walking around not saying, I'm an intermediate Spanish learner or I'm a beginning French learner. You want to walk around saying, I'm a Duolingo 14. I'm a Duolingo 26. I'm a Duolingo 77. I'm a Duolingo 115. If we are able to achieve that level of being the standard, we think there's tons of business upside to that effort.
Coming up, Lily may be the flashiest example, but Matt Skarupa tells me Duolingo's investments in AI are bringing all kinds of returns.
We're using AI in ways to create massively more content than we could otherwise create.
And Duolingo's patient approach to growth sometimes makes investors anxious. That's a feature, not a bug.
We have an operating principle that's in our handbook. Take the long view.
This is Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Open Interest.
The kids, the millennials, they now all of a sudden have to pay back their student loans again.
Part of the millennial generation, when we also graduated, you were dealing with the aftermath of the financial crisis, and you also had this problem of finding jobs.
Weakness in the labor market is not just the young people, it's also my generation, the baby boomers. 67% of companies said, we're not thinking about hiring right now. That will change. This is a great time to be alive, I think.
Don't miss Open Interest, live weekdays.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives and laying the foundation for the future, from finance to defense, AI to entertainment, and from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories from the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers and the politics that shape global tech markets. I'm Annabelle Rulers in Hong Kong. I'm Sherian in Tokyo. Watch Bloomberg Tech Asia, only on Bloomberg Television.
No. Not like that.
That's the gift, I think. I think we're giving ourselves.
When you ask Duolingo's CFO Matt Skarupa about his career path, he doesn't just tell you where he's worked and when. He explains what he's learned at each stop along the journey, starting with his college degree in chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering taught me a ton about systems. They're all complex, and when you pull on one thing in a system, it's attached to everything else you find. And then after chemical engineering, I went to Bain, the consulting firm, where I learned the power of pure strategy, but really about how you communicate strategy and how important that communication is to the actual strategy. Following that, I went to KKR, where I learned from the best capital allocators in the world. And what I learned from them was how you identify and then double down on durable businesses. At Goldman, I learned a ton about how you structure deals to maximize option value. And when you put all of that together, that's a pretty good CFO skill set. But it came about because I kept putting myself at the bottom of steep learning curve. And then I found myself at Duolingo at the bottom of another steep learning curve in a company that loves putting people at the bottom of steep learning curves.
Skarupa also found himself in Pittsburgh, a city historically known more for steel than software. He's come to believe that physical and cultural distance from Silicon Valley has played a role in Duolingo's success.
Luis founded the business here and took a long time before they even thought about monetizing. That only happens in a place where you're removed from the social pressure or you're removed from the way of doing things that everyone else does. And I think that in a complex system, which our business is, where we have a bunch of process improvements that we make, being separated and far apart from the coasts initially really helped us develop that process and compound those gains over time. And I think that's a competitive advantage for us.
CEO Luis von Ahn says he considers Netflix and Spotify models for Duolingo to emulate. But with its emphasis on design, imagination, and style, there's more than a little Apple in Duolingo's appeal to consumers.
Engagement is the number one thing we try to solve for, and we try to do that by making the app joyful and fun. And we have a huge swath of really talented designers that enable us to iterate on that product every day and make it 1% better.
Creating something like that costs money. How do you do that? How do you make it engaging? How do you continue to iterate without breaking the bank?
The reason we have the business model we do in part is so that we have a good amount of cash flow that comes off the business to reinvest in design, because it really is a cycle. We think that the more we can put into making it a wow experience, a truly delightful product experience, the more people will stick around and the more chance we'll have to get more subscription dollars. And once we get those dollars, we can then reinvest in doing that. So it truly is a cycle over time.
Duolingo has increased headcount every year since its IPO, and design is the company's second largest department, behind engineering. It's determined to preserve a brand and culture based on joy and connection, even with its AI-first approach to content creation.
We're using AI in ways to create massively more content than we could otherwise create. Humans are still in the loop. We're still making sure that has an excellent quality to it. But we're about to release about 148 new courses that we weren't able to even think about creating if we didn't have AI available. So it essentially lets us keep costs flat and by orders of magnitude increase the content we create.
How are you using AI when testing the product right now?
We do dog food the lessons a ton internally with our employees, and everyone's expected to use the app and find bugs and do all of that. There are going to be advances in AI that help us to write code better, test that code, these type of things, and we'll implement those over time as well.
Do you A/B test with users too, who are outside the company?
Oh, for sure. The biggest way we improve the product over time is through our A/B testing methodology, and it's really the core process moat that we have. And what that means is that we are making small changes, testing them on subsets of our users, seeing what wins and what doesn't, and then implementing what wins.
With AI driving faster creation of new content, Duolingo now has more courses to attract more users in more countries.
We think that we can grow in almost every country in the world from here. There are about 2 billion people in the world learning a language. A lot of them are learning English. And we've gotten even better at providing more advanced English content over the past couple years, especially as AI has helped us create that content.
What about China?
China's been a really rapidly growing market for us. It's been relatively small in terms of total number of users, but it is an enormous language market. Not only are there a lot of English learners in the market, but they spend a lot of money on English learning.
Advanced learners outside the US are more likely to become paid subscribers. But that creates pricing challenges, since AI features like Lily cost more, and users in many countries can't easily afford rates charged to US customers.
We try to adjust the price to be more comparable to like a GDP per capita ratio. And then for Max in particular, we set a floor where we want to make a good gross profit dollars per Max subscription. Over time, as the cost of Max comes down, we would expect to have more ability to experiment with the Max price and potentially lower it in regions where that made sense.
Coming up,
Feliz Viernes.
Duolingo has nothing against making money. So why do they refuse to show their users more advertising?
When we went public, Luis mentioned that at any given moment, we could dramatically increase our revenue at the drop of a hat by adding more ads. And then he said that he didn't want to do that.
This is Bloomberg.
The multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, Mondays on Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Allen, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up to them in the news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Sherian in Seoul, and this is Bloomberg.
Duolingo has steadily grown both users and revenue since going public in 2021. It's turned a profit in each of the last 2 full years. The company's stock has surged in the last 12 months, even as it resists the urge to pull some levers that would drive short-term growth.
There is a nice confluence between the long-term investor and what we're trying to do. We have an operating principle that's in our handbook, take the long view. When we went public, we put a timeline up on the screen for the whole company in an all-hands meeting. And that timeline went from founding to 100 years out. And the IPO was one dot in 1 year on that timeline. And we tried to orient the employees to, this is a wonderful event, this IPO. It's fantastic, but it's a moment in time on a very long journey.
This is a company that you want to exist in 100 years.
We do.
Wall Street doesn't think in.
No, they think in like hours. Yeah. And what I've learned of Wall Street, and particularly Wall Street investors, when they say they are long-term investors, that means they'll keep your stock for like a month. There has been one instance where I did something that was just for short-term stock, and I felt so bad about it that I don't think I'll do it again.
What was that?
There was one quarter, a few quarters ago, we were not going to beat the quarter. We were going to probably just hit it, and so far we beat every quarter. So we were all like, wait, what? Our perfect record. We're like a 4.0 student that is going to get a B for the first time. This is not good. And I decided that for a short period of time, at the end of a lesson in our app, we would show 2 ads instead of 1. Turns out that by itself was good enough to beat the quarter, but it's bad for the product. It's not good. And after that, I'm never doing that again.
While Duolingo's overall revenues have soared, revenue growth from ads has been relatively modest. Wall Street may just have to learn to live with it.
You must be tempted to just show a few more ads and bring in some more revenue from that free tier.
When we went public, Luis mentioned that at any given moment, on any given day, in any given hour, we could dramatically increase our revenue at the drop of a hat by adding more ads. And then he said that he didn't want to do that.
Do you foresee that view shifts at all in the next few years? I mean, there was a time when people said Netflix will never do ads.
I've learned enough as a public company CFO to never say never. However, Luis is the most hands-on CEO I've ever seen or worked with. While he's around, I do not see that changing.
But there are some changes to keep an eye on. Duolingo has offered lessons in music and math since 2023, and it's now rolling out a chess course.
We really do want to be an app that teaches, most subjects that take a long time to learn. We're not going to be teaching you how to fix your faucet that you can probably do on YouTube, but if it's something that takes a long time to learn, we want to be teaching that to you. We're starting with math and music, but we're probably going to add many other things.
It makes a ton of sense that math and music are the next adjacencies that we would look at, because they're very much in keeping with how you learn a language. You have to repeat it frequently, and it follows a set of structured rules.
How much capital will they require to be built out?
It will depend on how much they grow and how successful they are. And we'll make those decisions over time iteratively.
What about margins? How should investors think about margins on those products?
They're part of the main app, and that means they're part of the main subscriptions. And so they're fundamental base is not a different margin profile. Some of them will have different marginal costs or this or that. But over time, we have been consistent that we like our high gross margin business, and we're going to try to endeavor to keep it.
Matt Skarupa models Duolingo's first principle: take the long view in everything he does as CFO. So I asked him what he sees when he trains his binoculars on the future.
What's the opportunity in the next decade for Duolingo that most excites you?
To fundamentally make our app much more like a human tutor in your pocket.
What's the challenge for Duolingo that keeps you up at night?
How to keep our employees, who are incredibly talented, incredibly craft-oriented and design-oriented, motivated and excited and engaged in the long-term mission.
How do you see your role as CFO changing over the next 10 years?
I think the role of the CFO is going to change a lot over the next 10 years as we automate so much more of the manual work that goes on. And I think that will free up CFOs, controllers, heads of FP&A to do more high-level strategic thinking. And so the real job will become, how do we make sure we're staying at the leading edge of all of the strategic questions that we can bring our expertise to bear on in the company when we're removed from some of the more manual tasks.
What's the skill set or an area of knowledge that you would advise every aspiring CFO to develop?
If I were not a CFO, public company CFO, in a different life, I would love to have been a poet. And so I think that aspiring CFOs need to realize that they're interacting with humans every day. And humans have a variety of motivations and interests and fears and compulsions. And so I would do anything you could to become better at understanding other people. Poetry is a great way to do that.
Complete this sentence. The hardest part about being a CFO is?
The hardest part about being a CFO is the fact that there are so many tasks and context switches that you have to make, and the job is so systematic that making sure that you're on top of all of that and thinking about it from a systems perspective and not a one-off perspective is the hardest part.
A friend calls you up and says, I've got great news. I've been promoted to CFO. You say congratulations. What's the first piece of advice you give them?
Make sure that you understand the hopes and fears of your CEO, because that's going to determine the strategy, and you need to be aligned with that. And the first part of alignment is understanding.
I'm Tim Stenevec. This is Bloomberg.
Bringing you the world's business and financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at Mount Everest, and this is Bloomberg.
I'm Alex Rodriguez. And I'm Jason Kelly. And we're back with another season of The Beagle, with athletes and entrepreneurs who are changing the game on and off the field. Jerry Jones, Erica Ayers-Badon, Up in Our Zone, Justin Tuck. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
Good morning. I'm Joanna Versace in Dubai, and here's what we're following this morning. China will impose an additional 55% tariff on imported beef from countries including the U.S. The tariffs will be applied to shipments exceeding set quotas and will come into effect from January the 1st, according to the country's Commerce Ministry. The move, put in place to bolster domestic prices and protect local farmers, could help ease global beef prices that have surged to a record high amid strong demand and tight supplies in other regions. And Bloomberg has learned that Warner Bros. Discovery plans to once again reject a takeover bid from Paramount. Sources say its board will meet next week to make a final decision. Paramount is offering $30 a share for all of Warner Bros., including its cable networks CNN and TNT. Warner Brothers has already accepted an offer from Netflix for $27.50 a share. Warner Brothers has argued in public filings that it believes that Netflix offers is superior for a number of reasons, including that Paramount will be heavily indebted and plans to cut more jobs. Oil is headed for its steepest annual loss since the start of the pandemic. Prices have been undermined by concerns of a surplus. Brent steadied above $61 a barrel, with prices down 18% so far this year. WTI near 58. Meanwhile, Bloomberg has learned OPEC Plus is expected to stick with a planned output pause when it meets on January 4th. Key members led by Saudi Arabia and Russia will meet virtually and review the decision. And a quick check on markets. We have the European Stock 600 trading slightly underwater, 16 basis points or so. S&P futures down 0.3, but still up more than 17% for the year. Silver down 5.5% today, but still up more than 150% for the year. And then Brent, $61.20 is where we're at, slightly weaker this morning. The weakest year, though, since the pandemic for the energy complex. This is Bloomberg.
Remember, before dialing, listen for dial tone.
It's not like he was proposing to bring back the rotary phone. But when John Stankey became AT&T's chief executive officer in 2020, he sensed the company had strayed a little too far from its roots.
There clearly was a need based on kind of where the investor base was and where performance was to take a step back and say it was time to maybe simplify the business and get it more focused.
America's oldest telecom had grown into a sprawling media and communications giant with the heaviest debt load of any non-financial company in the world. To turn around, it had to slim down.
And when the decision was made that we needed to focus, we started to ask ourselves, well, how do we compete? What are the things we need to do?
What he concluded very quickly is, if we want to be the very best connectivity company, we can't half-step it. We have to lean in. We have to invest a lot more.
Connectivity may not be as sexy as Hollywood, but it's been AT&T's core business since the days of Ma Bell. Stankey needed a partner to help rebuild that legacy on a foundation of new technology. He asked Pascal Desroches to be his CFO.
I said yes right away, but I recognized the enormity of the challenge ahead of us.
When you got here and you looked under the hood, were you surprised by the enormity of it? Were you sort of overwhelmed, or did you feel like, all right, I got this right away?
I did not think I had this all the way. You come in, you have a sense for what the issues are, but until you're actually in this seat and really learning firsthand the depth of the problem and the complexity of the problems, it's hard to fully appreciate.
He dug into them piece by piece and day by day.
One of the things that I think I do very well, I'm pretty good at not making problems bigger than they are. I'm a believer you try to make progress on big problems every day, and ultimately you look back and say, hey, you've come a long way.
AT&T has come a long way since Stankey and Desroches teamed up. It's gone from a lumbering, over-leveraged company to a darling of the AI revolution.
That first 18 months was trying to right-size the balance sheet and also making sure we were, at the same time, investing significantly in the businesses to get growth going again. A lot more of my time now is spent on working hand in hand with the operators and making sure I'm giving them resources that they need to execute on the strategic priorities.
Everything in our business is a team sport. It's an operating business. And I saw in Pascal somebody who'd be a really collaborative CFO, somebody who's going to work well with the team and make everybody kind of elevate.
Pascal Desroches brings much more than a head for numbers to the CFO role.
By always looking externally, it allows you to make sure that we are at our very best.
Call it a flair for connectivity.
I've been really blessed. I have such a great team.
He is incredibly patient and has a gift to be able to repeat and tell people things multiple times so that they can build their understanding.
We have honest discussions about what's going well, what's not going well, and we're really transparent about what we're trying to do. Early on, there were skeptics, but over time, we were consistent in communicating, this is our North Star, this is what we're trying to do, this is why we think we are on the right track. Over time, we've built an enormous amount of trust. And right now we're seeing a lot of the benefits of it.
Over the last 5 years, AT&T has grown leaner by design, selling Warner Media and DirecTV, and using the proceeds to strengthen its 5G wireless and fiber broadband capacity. No company has invested more capital into U.S. connectivity infrastructure in this decade. Now it's poised to satisfy soaring demand for higher bandwidth and faster speeds.
We have our broadband or fiber product. We have our fixed wireless product, which is basically internet using our wireless network. And then you have your traditional wireless.
Why fiber?
It has the fastest speed. It has the lowest cost to maintain relative to your traditional copper, which is what we're upgrading.
Beauty of fiber, it's symmetrical. It sends the same amount of data up as it sends down. And so is betting on that kind of capable infrastructure was going to be necessary for the AI economy.
I think fiber future-proofs your network. It took about 20 years for the United States to see about half of its households built out with fiber. We're going to see that 50% go to 80% in about 5 years. We don't see any other technology that will set your network up better for long-term bandwidth consumption.
Fiber provides the lowest unit economic cost, and 5G provides the lowest economic cost for wireless. We are the only company that has scaled networks in both fiber and wireless. We think this is going to be a natural cost advantage, allowing us to drive not only the best economics for ourselves, but also drive the best value for consumers.
AT&T has a decisive edge in fiber subscribers over competitors Verizon and T-Mobile. It trails its rivals in wireless subscribers.
Right now with fiber, AT&T is the clear leader. When it comes to wireless, AT&T is not number one. Does that matter?
Well, look, I don't like being number 3 in anything. So let's start with that. I look at shared service revenue, and we've been making really good progress the last few years under John's leadership in growing our shared service revenue.
What we're geared toward is to get the highest share of wallet in the industry. And maybe some of it comes from fixed and maybe some of it from wireless. So we may not be the number one handset purveyor or the number one broadband purveyor, but the question is our total spend in the industry at the highest level? And that's really the strategy we're pursuing right now.
The bet on fiber is expected to pay off in double-digit growth on the consumer side. At the same time, DesRoches is working to take AT&T's legacy copper network offline and get its cost off the books.
Right now we are running both a copper network and a fiber network. Our copper is declining, but there is a certain element of fixed cost associated with it, about $6 billion of total expenses that will, over time, decline to zero. But it's going to take some time. Our goal is by the end of the decade, by the end of 2029, to be out of the copper business.
Copper is sort of an interesting substance because it's also a commodity. Are you selling it? Are you going into the commodity trade?
Believe it or not, we are decommissioning parts of our network, our copper network. We are selling it, and it's been, with the prices today, it's pretty attractive. We have a lot of copper still in the ground, and at these prices, we will make a return on those.
Every little bit helps for a CFO who plans to spend about $22 billion in CapEx in each of the next 3 years. While some companies pump the brakes on investment in an uncertain economy, that's not really an option for AT&T.
If we break down our CapEx into the buckets that we spend, a big part of it is to expand our reach of fiber. You cannot wait until there is certainty to build that. These have long lead times that require you to have conviction about where demand is going. Another bucket is, as more people are on our network, we also have to add more coverage and capacity. It's almost like a variable expense. Third, We are modernizing our wireless network right now. Through the investments we're making, we are driving down our unit costs over time and providing more capacity to serve the demand that we think is coming.
Do you have less confidence in that 3-year plan now than when you first came out with it, given that some people are having trouble deciding how things are going to look in the next 3 days?
No, I really don't. I look at the nature of our business. It doesn't matter the economic cycle. It is a critical goods or service, and we have every confidence demand for it will remain. Will it be harder in a more challenged economic environment if that ends up being the case? Of course, but remember, we are investing at record levels. Slight moderations of that would allow us to deliver a lot more incremental cash to the bottom line. So I have every confidence we're going to be able to deliver our guidance.
That guidance includes returning $40 billion to shareholders through dividends and buybacks.
The last several years, we've invested significantly and haven't raised the dividend, so we thought an important next step was to deliver even more value through a stock buyback.
Why is now the time to do buybacks?
I think our stock is so incredibly attractively priced, and so by buying back more, we're giving more value to those who remain, and we are confident in our ability to continue to increase the price of our stock.
AT&T has the cash to reward shareholders, largely thanks to Desroches' management of his balance sheet. The company has steadily pared down its debt. Now it can focus on investing for growth and even lever back up for M&A.
Is the threshold higher to buy something that looks attractive at this point, given that financing costs are so much higher? Should you tap the debt markets again?
Financing costs are higher than they were the last 5 years, but I've been around business long enough to know that the financing costs can be a lot higher than this. I'll give you an example. At the end of March, we went out to the market, issued 10-year notes. The effective cost of that was about 5.2% pre-tax. For a business our size and scale, when you add the tax benefits, it's still a very low cost of capital.
As the competition for connectivity intensifies, so has the appetite for deals among the industry's major players.
There are 3 national wireless carriers in the U.S., and that's really been created through consolidation that's taken place over many years. As a wireless company, by definition, you compete in the whole country. In the fiber business, it's a regional, semi-national business. And so the more you can scale up your fiber business, the better you can compete with fixed wireless, obviously the incumbents in cable. And so that's been, I think, the motivating factor around a lot of this M&A activity.
In May 2025, AT&T joined the fray when it agreed to buy Lumen Technologies' consumer fiber business.
We're picking up about 4.5 million active homes that have been passed and connected in a footprint that can probably grow to close to 10 million homes that are attractive to invest in. We'll go from 50 million U.S. households passed with fiber by 2030 to 60 million U.S. households passed with fiber by 2030, and probably tops out around 70 million after 2030.
Pascal Desroches says that when future opportunities arise, he'll be ready and able to pursue them.
Some of those opportunities may be invest more in our business because we know that we're very familiar with the returns, but it's really having that flexibility that's so critically important, because now we can take advantage of opportunities without having to worry about our balance sheet.
Coming up, Pascal Desroches takes me to the room where connectivity happens.
Think about it as the brains of the network.
A visit to the central office next. This is Bloomberg. AT&T's CFO Pascal Desroches doesn't shy away from a challenge. He's been meeting them all his life, starting as a young child when his family emigrated to the U.S. from Haiti.
I remember going to school and not knowing the language and having to work really hard to get the language and the lessons, and seeing my parents work really hard. Honestly, it drives me to this day, their sacrifices that they made to position us to come to this country.
Desroches started his career in accounting, rising to partner at KPMG. He also spent 2 years in government as a professional accounting fellow at the SEC. Shifting to the corporate world, he spent 15 years in finance roles at Time Warner, before landing his first CFO position at Turner Broadcasting. After a stint as CFO of Warner Media Group, he moved into his current job at AT&T.
I want to be as knowledgeable as possible. I'm constantly pushing myself to be uncomfortable.
What would you say you've taken from each of the experiences, from government, from accounting, from big corporations?
What you learn is this: it's always hard when you start. You've got to be patient with yourself. You learn resilience, and you go through a lot of different environments, a lot of different challenges. You build resilience, and that is probably the one thing I would say that has really helped me in my latest assignment is the resilience that I've built up over the years.
His resilience and zest for learning makes Pascal Desroches the ideal CFO for AT&T as it plots its future around 5G wireless and fiber. It's hard to understand the scale of this journey until you see it up close and in person at one of the connectivity hubs known as central offices.
Traffic is aggregated from the different neighborhoods and then onto what is we call our core. Think about it as the brains of the network. It gives routing instructions in terms of where the traffic needs to go to based upon the command from your phone, your tablet, your computer.
We're talking next to another room that looks sort of like this, but a little dated, with all the copper infrastructure in it. That's all getting phased out, isn't it?
It is getting phased out, but there's still, let's say, about 5% of our customers are still on copper wired phones. Think landlines, think legacy DSL. And there are all sorts of regulatory requirements that limit our ability to get out of that technology quickly. So we're required to serve both the historical legacy copper technology as well as the fiber technology.
So when this ends up getting phased out, you have a lot of space left. What are you planning to do with it?
Once we decommission copper, what will happen is we're going to have excess space that we're going to probably be able to monetize and sell. We recently did a transaction where we sold, 75 wire centers, and we kept access to our infrastructure, but there was still a lot of space in the building as well as adjacent land that we were able to sell at a really attractive price because we had scaled down our investment in copper.
Fiber doesn't just take up less space, it increases efficiency at every level.
For each one of these fiber cables, they snake back to a neighborhood. Each strand of fiber has several customers on it. It has a lot more capacity. Fiber consumes 70% less energy than copper. Similarly, the maintenance profile of fiber is so much better. We spend 35% less on maintaining fiber. So it's a win-win. It's a better product and less maintenance, less energy bill.
Right now, there are more than 4,500 central offices across the U.S. AT&T intends to cut that number down by the end of the decade, but the ones that remain will still play a critical role in the business.
It's really important that you have points of aggregation to ensure that you are touching as many endpoints across the country as possible. So yes, it's expensive to have them, but they also give you enormous reach across the country.
Coming up, how tariffs could hit the telecom sector is just one more thing Pascal Desroches is keeping his eye on.
Anything that can impact the consumer's ability to afford services, you always pay attention to.
This is Bloomberg.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Used to be, one would say, what's that got to do with the price of tea in China, when they wanted to poke holes in the relevance of something? Now though, if you're in tune with how events around the world affect each other, it becomes clear that the current going rate of tea in China has a lot to do with a lot of things, Not just tea things either, but tariffs, franchises, and IPOs. How much?
Astonishing day for US technology.
It's shaping the region's technology.